"Grandma, why did Mom say you died?" The question pierced through me like a bullet, spoken from the innocent lips of a child I hadn't seen in 5 years. My 7-year-old grandson, Ethan, stood in the middle of the Lakeside Mall food court, his wide blue eyes, identical to his mother's, staring up at me with confusion that quickly morphed into something worse. Fear. I couldn't speak. My throat closed as if invisible hands were strangling me. Around us, the world continued its mindless hum. Teenagers laughing over pretzel bites, tired mothers corralling toddlers, the distant clatter of trays and murmured conversations. But between Ethan and me, time stood suspended, fragile as glass. "She told me you died before I was 2, he whispered, taking a step back from me. His small sneakers squeaked against the polished floor. "She said you had cancer." My hands trembled as I reached into my purse, not for a tissue to wipe away the tears already streaming down my lined cheeks, not for my phone to call my daughter and scream questions I'd been holding back for years. Instead, I pulled out my wallet and removed my driver's license. "Look at the date, sweetheart," I said, my voice barely audible as I knelt despite my arthritic knees to reach his level. "Look at my birthday. I'm very much alive." His small fingers took the plastic card. I watched his lips move as he tried to make sense of the information. Margaret Eleanor Winters, 65 Maple Street, Springfield, Massachusetts. Due B. 06-15-1958. But why would Mom lie? His bottom lip quivered. The food court lights seemed to dim. The ambient noise faded. There was only this child, my blood, my heart, looking at me as if I were a ghost. And in a way, I was. A ghost created by my own daughter's cruel fiction. "That's what I've been trying to understand for 5 years, I whispered. Behind Ethan, I saw her, Amanda, my daughter, frozen by the Cinnabon stand, shopping bags dangling from her wrists, horror etched across her perfect face as our eyes locked over the head of her son, the grandson she had stolen from me through the most unforgivable lie a child could tell. The cinnamon scent in the air turned sickening as memories crashed into me. The last time I'd seen her, the screaming, the accusations, the threat she'd made that I never believed she would follow through on. "You'll never see him again. As far as he'll know, you died before he could remember you." But she had done exactly that, murdered me with words, erased me from existence in the mind of the one person I had left to love in this world. "Mom said you were in heaven," Ethan continued, his voice growing louder with confusion. "She takes me to put flowers on a grave every year on Grandparents' Day." My heart splintered. A grave. My God, she had gone so far as to create a grave. "Ethan!" Amanda's voice cut through the moment as she rushed toward us. "Come here right now." But Ethan didn't move. Instead, he looked from the ID in his small hand to my face, studying the features that matched the photo. Then he did something that broke the last intact piece of my heart. He reached out and touched my cheek, as if to verify I was solid flesh and not some apparition. "You feel real," he said. "I am real," I whispered back. "I've always been real, Ethan, and I've missed you every single day." Amanda reached us then, her manicured hand clamping around Ethan's arm. "We're leaving," she hissed, her eyes, so like mine once upon a time, filled with a coldness I still couldn't comprehend coming from my own child. "But Mom," Ethan protested, still holding my ID. "Grandma's not dead. You lied." The word lied hung in the air between us all, a living thing with teeth and claws. And then, as Amanda yanked Ethan away, I saw something I'd never expected to see in my daughter's eyes as she looked back at me. Fear. She was afraid of me, not of what I might do, but of what I now knew, that she had killed her mother with nothing but words, and built her son's understanding of family on a foundation of lies. My name is Margaret Winters, though everyone has called me Maggie since before I can remember. I live alone in a modest 2-bedroom house in Springfield, Massachusetts, the same house where I raised my only daughter, Amanda. It's too big for just me, but I can't bear to leave the walls that hold the echoes of happier times. Every morning begins the same way. I wake at 5:30 a.m., brew coffee in the ancient percolator that my late husband Richard insisted made better coffee than any modern machine, and sit at my kitchen table watching the sun slowly illuminate the small backyard where a swing set still stands, rusting and unused. I keep meaning to have it removed, but somehow I never make the call. I'm a retired elementary school librarian. After Richard died of a heart attack when Amanda was only 15, I threw myself into my work with other people's children while trying to keep my own from falling apart. For 27 years, I read stories to wide-eyed kindergartners, helped fourth graders discover the magic of Charlotte's Web, and guided reluctant teenagers toward books that might speak to their troubled souls. Now, my days are quieter than I ever imagined they could be. I volunteer at the community center 3 days a week, teaching seniors like myself how to use computers and smartphones, technology that moves too fast for arthritic fingers and minds that process a beat slower than they once did. The irony isn't lost on me that I help other grandparents FaceTime with grandchildren across the country, while mine lives less than 30 minutes away, believing I'm nothing but dust and bone beneath a headstone I've never seen. My neighbors think they know my story. Poor Maggie, widowed young, devoted to her only child. They've watched me plant my garden each spring, rake leaves in the fall, shovel my own driveway despite their offers of help. What they don't see is how I pause sometimes, catching a glimpse of a young mother and child walking past my house, and have to grip whatever is nearest to keep from collapsing under the weight of my loss. Loss. Such an inadequate word for what happened. People lose keys, lose track of time, lose touch with old friends. What word exists for having your existence denied? For being erased by the person you carried inside your body for 9 months, whose nightmares you soothed, whose skinned knees you bandaged, whose every triumph you celebrated as if it were your own. Before the mall incident, I had last seen Ethan when he was 2 years old. He had his grandfather's cowlick and my chin. He loved toy trucks and would line them up in perfect rows across my living room floor. His laugh was pure sunshine. And then, after that terrible fight with Amanda, he vanished from my life as completely as if he'd never existed. I tried everything to reconnect. I sent birthday cards that came back marked "Return to Sender." I called until Amanda changed her number. I went to their house once, only to find they'd moved without a forwarding address. I even hired a private investigator who discovered they'd only moved across town, but warned me that any attempt to contact them could be considered harassment. So I lived in limbo, not knowing if Ethan remembered me at all, wondering what Amanda had told him about me, never imagining the grotesque lie she had constructed. Dead. She told my only grandchild I was dead. In the days after our chance encounter at the mall, I waited for something to happen. A phone call, a cease and desist letter, police at my door. But there was only silence, which somehow felt worse than any confrontation. I kept replaying Ethan's face when he realized I wasn't a ghost, the way his small fingers had touched my cheek, the betrayal dawning in his eyes when he understood his mother had lied to him about something so fundamental. It was on the 5th day after the mall that my doorbell rang just after 8 p.m. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a brief, irrational moment, I feared it might be Amanda coming to finish what she'd started, to make me as dead in reality as I had been in her stories. Instead, when I opened the door, I found my next-door neighbor, Susan, looking uncomfortable on my porch. "Maggie," she said, twisting her hands together, "there's a little boy sitting on your back steps. Has been for at least 20 minutes. I wouldn't have bothered you, but it's getting dark, and he seems upset." My heart leaped into my throat. I thanked her quickly and rushed through my house to the back door. And there he was, Ethan, huddled in a too-thin jacket, a Spider-Man backpack clutched to his chest, his cheeks red from cold and tears. "Ethan," I whispered, pushing open the screen door. "How did you get here?" He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed but determined. "I took the bus. I remembered the address from your ID." I sank down beside him on the steps, careful to move slowly, afraid he might bolt like a frightened animal. "Does your mother know where you are?" He shook his head, clutching his backpack tighter. "She's at her yoga class. The babysitter is watching TV. She won't notice I'm gone for at least another hour." "Oh, Ethan," I sighed. "She'll be worried sick." "I don't care," he said with the brutal honesty only a child can muster. "She lied about you. She takes me to put flowers on some random grave and tells me it's my grandma." His voice cracked. "I talk to you there. I tell that grave about my school and my friends and the Lego sets I build. But you were here all along." The pain in my chest was physical. I had to fight to draw breath. "I've been here," I confirmed. "I've never stopped thinking about you." "Why did she lie?" he asked again, the central question for which I had no satisfactory answer. "Your mother and I began, then stopped, unsure how to explain something I barely understood myself. We had a disagreement, a very serious one. About what? Such a simple question. Such a complicated answer. About what was best for you, I said finally. It wasn't the whole truth, but it wasn't a lie either. Ethan considered this, his small face serious in the fading light. So she decided what was best for me was to think my grandma was dead. Put that way, the cruelty of it struck me anew. She was wrong, I said softly. Very wrong. I brought pictures, he said suddenly, unzipping his backpack, to make sure you're really my grandma. Mom has all the family albums locked in her closet, but I found these in the attic when I was looking for my old train set. From the backpack, he pulled out 3 photographs, creased and slightly faded. He handed them to me with solemn importance. The first showed Amanda as a teenager, sitting on our old porch swing, laughing at something off camera. The second was of Richard holding baby Amanda the day we brought her home from the hospital, his face a mixture of terror and adoration. The third was of me, Amanda, and 2-year-old Ethan, taken at his birthday party, the last time I had seen him before the mall. That's you, Ethan said, pointing at me in the third photo. And that's me. Yes, I whispered, tears blurring my vision. That's us. So you're really my grandma, he said. Not a question this time. A statement of fact. I really am. He nodded once, decisive. Then I want to know everything. Everything Mom didn't tell me. Everything she lied about. His small jaw set in a determination that reminded me so much of Amanda at that age, that it physically hurt. I want the truth. The truth. Such a simple request, and yet answering it would set in motion events I couldn't control or predict. But looking at this child who had taken a city bus alone, who had kept those precious photos hidden, who had the courage to seek answers rather than accept comfortable lies, I knew I couldn't turn him away without giving him what he'd come for. The truth is complicated, Ethan, I said gently, and some of it might be hard to hear. I'm 7, he replied with dignity. That's not a baby anymore. Despite everything, I smiled. No, it's not. So you'll tell me? I took a deep breath and made a decision that would change everything. Come inside, I said, standing and offering my hand. I'll make hot chocolate and we'll talk. But first, I need to call your mother. His face fell. You're going to send me back. Eventually, yes, I said honestly. But not before we talk. She needs to know you're safe, though. That's non-negotiable. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded and placed his small hand in mine. As we walked into the house that should have been as familiar to him as his own, I felt the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. I was about to rewrite the story Amanda had carefully constructed for her son, and in doing so, I would have to face the painful truth of why she had written me out of it in the first place. The first time Amanda showed me what she was capable of, Ethan wasn't even born yet. She was 28, recently married to Daniel, and had just announced her pregnancy. I thought it was the happiest time of our lives. I was going to be a grandmother, something I'd dreamed of since Richard died, leaving me alone to navigate the choppy waters of raising a teenage daughter. I remember the day clearly. It was a crisp October afternoon, leaves crunching beneath my feet as I walked up the driveway to Amanda and Daniel's new colonial-style home in Westfield. I carried a basket of baby books, classics I'd saved from Amanda's childhood, imagining someday sharing them with her children. Amanda answered the door looking radiant in a flowing maternity dress, her hand resting protectively on the slight curve of her belly. She hugged me warmly, ushering me inside to the immaculate living room where everything was beige and white, without a hint of the colorful chaos that had defined our home when she was growing up. "Mom, there's someone I want you to meet," she said, an odd tone in her voice I couldn't quite place. "Daniel's mother is visiting from Chicago." She led me to the sunroom where a tall, elegantly dressed woman with perfectly coiffed silver hair sat drinking tea. Patricia Spencer. Even her name sounded expensive. "Pat, this is my mother, Maggie," Amanda said. Then she added with a strange emphasis, "My biological mother." The word biological hung in the air like an unexpected insult. Patricia's perfectly made-up eyes assessed me from head to toe, taking in my sensible shoes, my department store slacks, my hands that showed years of work despite regular manicures. I felt immediately inadequate, a feeling I hadn't experienced since high school. "Lovely to meet you," Patricia said without rising. "Amanda has told me so much." "All good things, I hope," I attempted to joke, setting my basket of books on a side table. "She's mentioned how hard it must have been for you," raising her alone after your husband passed. Such a shame. Daniel was fortunate to have both parents throughout his formative years. I glanced at Amanda, expecting her to defend me, to mention how I'd worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, how I'd never missed a school event, how we'd built a life filled with love despite our loss. But she just smiled tightly and offered me tea. The funny thing is, Patricia continued, stirring honey into her cup, children really do need that stable 2-parent household. I've always said it. Amanda agrees we were right to insist Daniel only seriously date girls from intact families, but exceptions can be made when there are extenuating circumstances. My mouth went dry. Intact families? I repeated, looking between them. Mom, don't make a thing of it, Amanda said quickly. Pat just means traditional family structures are important to them, and they're going to be so involved with the baby. Isn't that wonderful? Pat's already redecorating their guest room as a nursery for when we visit. I see, I said, though I didn't. Not completely. Not yet. Patricia has been incredible, Amanda continued, her voice taking on that eager-to-please tone I hadn't heard since she was a teenager trying to fit in with the popular girls. She's introduced us to the most amazing pediatrician. He handled all the Chicago Bears players' children, and she's helping us get on the wait list for Brightwood Academy. It's never too early, apparently. Brightwood Academy? I asked. Isn't that a private preschool? The baby won't need that for years. Patricia laughed, a tinkling sound like ice and crystal. Oh, the best schools have wait lists that start before birth. Daniel attended Brightwood, as did his father. Legacy admissions matter. I nodded politely, wondering when my daughter had started caring about legacy admissions and Chicago Bears pediatricians. Amanda had attended public schools her entire life and had thrived. We'd discussed many times how she valued her diverse education, how it had shaped her worldview in ways her more privileged college classmates couldn't understand. I brought some of your old baby books, I said to Amanda, reaching for my basket. I thought maybe we could read them to the baby, like I used to read to you. Amanda's eyes flicked to Patricia, who was examining the basket with thinly veiled distaste. Oh, Mom, that's sweet. But Pat has already ordered the entire Montessori-approved newborn library. It's all about early stimulation now. Those old books probably have outdated gender stereotypes anyway. I flinched as if she'd slapped me. Those books had been treasures, carefully preserved mementos of her childhood. Tales I'd read to her night after night, doing all the voices, creating ritual and comfort in the difficult years after Richard died. Well, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, maybe just keep 1 or 2, for nostalgia. We're trying to minimize clutter, Amanda replied, not meeting my eyes. The nursery designer says clean lines promote cognitive development. Nursery designer, private preschool waitlists, Montessori-approved libraries. Who was this woman? And what had she done with my daughter who once vowed to reject materialism and raise children connected to nature and community rather than status? The visit continued, growing increasingly uncomfortable as Patricia dominated the conversation with stories of Daniel's perfect childhood and thinly veiled criticisms of my parenting. Amanda not only failed to defend me, but seemed to agree with every word, occasionally adding anecdotes that painted her upbringing in shades of deprivation I didn't recognize. Remember how we could never afford summer camp, Mom? Pat was just saying how Daniel's sailing camp experience really built his leadership skills. The public school library was so limited compared to Brightwood's. They had a real reference librarian, not just parent volunteers. Each comment was delivered with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, as if she were warning me not to contradict the narrative she was building for her new mother-in-law. A narrative where she had somehow survived a deprived childhood and was now being rescued by the Spencer family's wealth and wisdom. When I left that afternoon, the basket of books remained on the side table. Amanda hugged me at the door, whispering, "Please don't be upset. This is important to Daniel." "What about what's important to you?" I asked quietly. She pulled back, her expression hardening. "This is what's important to me now. My family, my baby's future. Pat knows people, Mom. She has connections that can open doors we never even knew existed." "We," I repeated. "You and Daniel?" "Yes," she said, but wouldn't meet my eyes. It wasn't until I was driving home that the full impact of that afternoon hit me. The "we" Amanda referred to didn't include me. In the new narrative she was constructing for her child, I was being recast as something less than. The biological mother who had done her best, but couldn't provide the advantages Patricia Spencer took for granted. A character from a less fortunate past, rather than an integral part of a loving present. The betrayal was subtle, but profound. Amanda hadn't just accepted Patricia's condescension. She had participated in it, reinforced it, used it to distance herself from me and the life we'd shared. When I called her the next day to talk about it, she was defensive. "You're being oversensitive, Mom. Pat was perfectly nice to you. She treated me like I was some sort of cautionary tale," I said. "And you let her." "This isn't about you," Amanda snapped. "This is about what's best for my baby. Daniel's family can provide opportunities I never had. Don't you want that for your grandchild?" "Of course I want opportunities for my grandchild," I replied, "but not at the expense of honesty. Not at the expense of who we are and where we come from." "Where we come from," she repeated, her voice cold. "A small house in Springfield with second-hand furniture and discount store clothes. That's not where I am anymore, Mom." Her words struck like physical blows. "Is that all our life together was to you? Deprivation? You don't understand," she said. "You never had ambition beyond your little library job. I want more. I want everything for my child." I hung up before I said something unforgivable. That night, I cried for hours, mourning the daughter I thought I knew. The girl who had once made handmade birthday cards proclaiming me the world's greatest mom, who had sobbed in my arms after her father's funeral and promised we would always have each other, who had written college essays about growing up with a mother who showed her that wealth was measured in love and learning, not dollars. In the months that followed, Amanda increasingly aligned herself with the Spencers' worldview. Our weekly dinners became monthly, then sporadic. When I called, she was often too busy with birthing classes or nursery planning meetings to talk. When we did speak, she had a new vocabulary of terms like legacy planning and social capital that felt like a foreign language. By the time Ethan was born, I barely recognized the woman my daughter had become. At the hospital, I arrived with a hand-knitted blanket to find the room already overflowing with designer baby gear and Patricia Spencer directing a photographer for professional newborn portraits. "Oh, Mom, how homespun," Amanda said when I presented the blanket I'd spent months making. "We probably won't use it much. Ethan has sensitive skin, and the pediatrician recommended only organic Egyptian cotton." I stood there, blanket in hand, feeling like an intruder in my own daughter's life, in my grandson's birth story. Patricia caught my eye across the room and smiled, not unkindly, but with unmistakable triumph. She had won something I hadn't even known was a competition. It was the first betrayal, but far from the last. A test run, perhaps, for the greater cruelty to come. Amanda was practicing a new skill, the ability to revise history, to reshape reality to fit the image she wanted to project. And I was learning too slowly that in her new narrative, there was decreasingly little space for me. Explaining to 7-year-old Ethan why his mother had lied about my death was impossibly difficult. After I called Amanda to let her know he was safe with me, a tense conversation filled with threats and accusations, I sat with him at my kitchen table, trying to find words simple enough for a child to understand, yet honest enough to honor his quest for truth. "Your mom and I had different ideas about family," I began carefully, watching his serious little face. "About what's important." "Like what?" he asked, hands wrapped around a mug of hot chocolate topped with the mini marshmallows I always kept in my pantry, just in case. "Like, whether having lots of money and important connections matters more than other things," I said. "Like love and honesty and remembering where you came from." His brow furrowed. "Is that why you and Mom fought? Because of money?" I sighed, recognizing how inadequate my explanation was. "It's more complicated than that, Ethan. Sometimes when people want a certain kind of life very badly, they start to push away the parts of their past that don't fit with it." He seemed to consider this. "Like when I pretend I don't like dinosaurs anymore because Tyler at school said dinosaurs are for babies." I smiled despite myself. "Something like that, but bigger." "But why would she say you were dead? That's a really big lie." The question I couldn't fully answer, not even to myself. "I think," I said slowly, "it was easier for her than explaining the real reason we weren't talking anymore." Ethan's eyes, so like his mother's, studied me with a perceptiveness that belied his age. What was the real reason? I thought back to those early years of Ethan's life, when I was still allowed to be grandma, albeit on increasingly restricted terms, before the final confrontation that led Amanda to erase me completely. To understand that, I told him, I need to tell you about what kind of mother I was to your mom, and what our life was like before. And so I began to share the stories Amanda had apparently locked away, both literally in photo albums and figuratively in the narrative she constructed for her son. I told him about his grandfather Richard, the high school music teacher with the infectious laugh who played saxophone in a jazz quartet on weekends, how he had swept me off my feet at a community theater production, where I was working backstage and he was playing in the pit orchestra, how we had married young and bought our small house with the big backyard, planning to fill it with children and music. Your mom was our only child, I explained. We tried for more, but it wasn't meant to be. So she got all our love, all our attention. Was she happy? Ethan asked, and the question broke my heart a little. What child should have to wonder if their parent experienced happiness in childhood? Very happy, I assured him. She was a bright, curious girl who loved animals and books and climbing trees. She had your smile, quick and full of mischief. I told him how Richard would play silly songs on his saxophone, while Amanda danced around our living room, how we had picnics in the backyard and built snow forts in winter, how even though we didn't have much money, we prioritized experiences, camping trips to New Hampshire, museums on free admission days, concerts in the park. When your mom was 12, I continued, your grandfather got sick. His heart wasn't working properly. He died, Ethan said, not a question. I nodded. Yes, it happened very suddenly. One day he was teaching his students, and that night, I swallowed hard, the pain still fresh despite the decades. That night, his heart gave out. Were you sad? Terribly sad, I admitted. Your mom too. We had to figure out how to be a family of 2 instead of 3. I explained how I took on extra work, substitute teaching during the day, and bookkeeping for local businesses at night, to keep our home and provide for Amanda. How we grew even closer through our shared grief, becoming each other's support system and confidant. We didn't have fancy vacations or designer clothes, I said, but we had each other. And I made sure your mom had what she needed for school and activities. She was smart. So smart. She got a scholarship to Boston University. Did you help her with her homework like mom helps me? Every night, I confirmed. And I went to every school play and soccer game. I was there in the front row when she graduated as valedictorian of her high school class. As I spoke, I could see Ethan trying to reconcile these stories with whatever version of me his mother had created, or rather, erased. I wondered if Amanda ever spoke of her own childhood to Ethan, or if she had rewritten that history too. I showed Ethan old photo albums I'd kept despite Amanda's attempts to collect and control all family images. Pictures of Amanda missing her front teeth, clutching a beloved stuffed rabbit. Amanda in her first communion dress, looking solemn and angelic. Amanda and her father building a birdhouse in the backyard. Amanda as a teenager, rolling her eyes at the camera, but smiling despite herself. She looks happy, Ethan observed, studying a photo of 16-year-old Amanda, blowing out birthday candles on a homemade cake. She was, I said softly. At least I thought she was. We looked through more albums, and I told him stories attached to each image. How Amanda had rescued a baby bird that fell from its nest and nursed it back to health. How she had organized a book drive for her senior project, collecting thousands of volumes for underserved schools. How she had worked part-time at a veterinary clinic through college, considering becoming a vet before switching to marketing. Your mom was compassionate and hardworking, I told Ethan. She cared about making a difference. What happened to make her different? He asked, zeroing in on the question I had been circling around. I sighed. People change, Ethan. Sometimes they meet others who show them a different way of living, and they decide they want that instead. Like Grandpa and Grandma Spencer? The directness of children. Yes, I acknowledged. The Spencers have a very different lifestyle than what your mom grew up with. They value different things. Like what? Like social status, appearances, having the right connections. Ethan frowned. That sounds boring. Despite everything, I laughed. It might be to some people, but to others, it feels like success, like achieving something important. Did mom stop loving you because you didn't have those things? The question lanced through me. No, sweetheart, I don't think it was that simple. I think she started wanting a different story for herself, and eventually, a different story for you. A story without you in it, he said bluntly. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. That's mean, he declared with the straightforward moral clarity of childhood. You can't just pretend people don't exist because they don't fit your story. No, I agreed quietly. You shouldn't. We continued through the photo albums until we reached the ones featuring Ethan as a baby. His eyes widened, seeing himself in my arms, on my lap, being pushed by me on a swing. I remember this swing, he said suddenly, pointing to a photo taken in my backyard. It's rusty now. Yes, I confirmed, surprised. You were too young to remember, I thought. He shrugged. Sometimes I remember things, like a feeling, not a real memory. He touched another photo, this one showing me reading to him on my front porch. I think I remember your voice. Tears filled my eyes. I used to read to you for hours. You loved The Very Hungry Caterpillar. We had to read it 5 times in a row sometimes. Mom says I'm too old for picture books now, he confided. I have to read chapter books to build vocabulary. Another piece of Amanda's transformation clicked into place. Even children's literature had become a status marker, a measurement of achievement rather than joy. There's never an age limit on stories you love, I told him. Your grandfather was 60 when he died, and he still read Calvin and Hobbes comics every Sunday. Ethan's eyes lit up. What are those? And so we spent the next hour with my collection of Calvin and Hobbes treasuries, Ethan giggling over the antics of the mischievous 6-year-old and his tiger best friend, momentarily distracted from the heavier truths we had been discussing. As the evening progressed, I knew Amanda would arrive soon to reclaim her son. Before she did, I needed Ethan to understand something crucial. Your mother loves you very much, I told him, closing the last comic book. Everything she's done, even the mistakes, come from wanting what she thinks is best for you. But lying isn't best for me, he said firmly. No, I agreed. It isn't. Then why did she do it? I took his small hands in mine, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes, when people are afraid, they make choices that hurt others. I think your mom was afraid of the past she came from, afraid it might somehow hold you back from the future she wants for you. That's stupid, he said with a child's brutal honesty. It's human, I corrected gently. We all make mistakes when we're scared or confused. Even your mom. Even me. What mistakes did you make? He asked, eyes narrowing. Such insight from one so young. I didn't fight hard enough to stay in your life, I admitted. I let your mother push me away step by step, thinking she would eventually come around. By the time I realized how serious she was, it was too late. The doorbell rang, a sharp intrusion into our bubble of truth and reconnection. Ethan's face fell. That's Mom. Yes, I said, standing slowly, feeling every one of my 65 years in that moment. Remember what I said, Ethan. Your mom loves you. Be kind to her, even when you're angry about the lie. Will I see you again? He asked, suddenly looking very small and vulnerable. I hope so, I said, not wanting to make promises I couldn't keep. That will be up to your mother. And if she says no, I knelt before him, meeting his eyes. Then we'll find another way. I'm not going to disappear from your life again, Ethan. I promise. The doorbell rang again, more insistent. We walked together to answer it, my hand resting lightly on his shoulder. I could feel him straighten his spine, gathering courage for the confrontation to come. When I opened the door, Amanda stood on my porch, her face a mask of cold fury that couldn't quite hide the fear beneath. Get your things, Ethan, she said, without looking at me. We're leaving now. Ethan didn't move. Mom, he said, his voice small but steady. Why did you tell me Grandma was dead? And in that moment, watching my daughter's face as her carefully constructed fiction crumbled around her, I knew we had reached a point of no return. The past I had just shared with Ethan was about to collide violently with the present Amanda had created, and none of us would emerge unchanged. Amanda refused to answer Ethan's question on my porch. Instead, she grabbed his hand and practically dragged him to her gleaming white Lexus SUV parked in my driveway. I followed, calling her name, but she ignored me as if I were truly the ghost she had made me out to be in her son's life. Amanda, please, I said, hurrying after them despite my arthritic knee protesting each step. We need to talk about this. She whirled around, her eyes flashing. There is nothing to talk about. You've done enough damage. Damage? I repeated incredulously. I'm not the one who told a child his grandmother was dead. Her jaw tightened. "Get in the car, Ethan," she ordered, opening the back door. But Ethan stood his ground, looking between us with confusion and distress. "Mom, I want to know why you lied." "Not now, Ethan," she hissed. "Yes, now," he insisted with a stubborn set to his chin that reminded me painfully of Amanda at his age. "Grandma showed me pictures. I saw myself here when I was a baby. You told me she died before I could remember her, but that's not true." Amanda's face flushed with anger, and something else. Embarrassment, perhaps. She glanced around, as if worried the neighbors might be watching this family drama unfold in my driveway. "This is not a discussion we're having in public," she said through clenched teeth. "Then let's go inside," I suggested, trying to keep my voice calm despite my racing heart. "Ethan deserves answers, Amanda." "So do I." For a moment, I thought she would refuse. Then her shoulders sagged slightly. "Fine. 5 minutes. Then we're leaving." We walked back to my house in tense silence. Once inside, Amanda remained standing near the door, keys clutched in her hand like an escape route. Ethan sat on the couch, and after a moment's hesitation, I sat beside him. "Why did you lie about Grandma?" Ethan asked again, his voice stronger now that we were inside. Amanda's eyes flicked between us, calculation clear in her expression. "I was protecting you," she said finally. "From what?" Ethan and I asked simultaneously. She glared at me, from her negative influence, from her jealousy and bitterness, from her attempts to undermine our family. "Negative influence?" I repeated, stunned. "Amanda, when have I ever been a negative influence?" "From the moment Daniel and I got married," she shot back. "You couldn't stand that I had found a better life. You criticized everything. Our home, our friends, our parenting choices. I never criticized. You did it with every disappointed look, every passive-aggressive comment about how different my life was from how you raised me, as if that was something to be proud of. Struggling to make ends meet, never having nice things, always being the poor scholarship kid." Her words struck me like physical blows. Was that truly how she saw our life together? As some kind of deprivation she had to overcome? "Mom," I said softly, "we weren't poor. We were middle class. You had everything you needed and most of what you wanted. We were nothing compared to the Spencers," she retorted. "And you resented them from day one. You couldn't stand that they could give me and Ethan things you never could." "That's not true," I protested. "I was happy for your success, for the opportunities Daniel's family connections provided. What hurt was watching you become ashamed of where you came from, of me." "I wasn't ashamed," she snapped. "I was moving forward. But you kept trying to drag me back, to remind me and everyone around me of the modest little life we had. Do you know how uncomfortable that made Daniel? How it undermined me with his family?" Ethan had been looking back and forth between us like a spectator at a tennis match. Now he spoke up. "So you told me Grandma was dead because she embarrassed you?" Amanda flinched. "No, that's not..." She stopped, clearly struggling to find an explanation that wouldn't sound as cruel as the truth. "It was more complicated than that." "Then explain," he demanded. "Because Grandma showed me pictures of when I was little and she was there." "You lied about that." Amanda shot me a venomous look. "What else did she show you? What else did she tell you?" "Everything," Ethan said defiantly. "About Grandpa, and how you grew up, and how she came to all your school stuff even though she had to work a lot after Grandpa died. She gave you a very selective version of the past," Amanda said coldly. "She didn't tell you about the final straw, did she? About why I actually cut her out of our lives?" I tensed. "Amanda, this isn't appropriate for..." "No, Mom. Let's tell the whole truth if we're being so honest today," she interrupted. "Let's tell Ethan about the day of his second birthday party." My stomach clenched. The day everything had fallen apart. The day I lost not only my daughter, but my grandson. "What happened on my birthday?" Ethan asked, looking between us. Amanda's smile was razor sharp. "Your grandmother decided to publicly humiliate me in front of all our friends and family, in front of Daniel's colleagues and his parents. That's not what happened," I protested. "Isn't it?" Amanda's voice rose. "You stood up in front of everyone during the toast and decided to give a little speech about how different my childhood birthdays were, how we celebrated with homemade cakes and DIY decorations instead of professional event planners, how you were so surprised to see how extravagant Ethan's party was, with its unnecessary excess." I closed my eyes briefly, remembering my words. I hadn't meant them as criticism, but as a reflection on how much Amanda had achieved, how far she'd come from our humble celebrations. But I could see now how they had sounded to her, to everyone listening. "I was trying to compliment you," I said quietly, "to show how proud I was of what you'd accomplished. By making me sound like I'd grown up in poverty," she spat. "By reminding everyone that I wasn't born into their world. Do you have any idea how hard I've worked to fit in with Daniel's circle? How carefully I've crafted my image as someone who belongs there? So, I embarrassed you," I acknowledged. "That was thoughtless of me, and I apologized afterward. But was it really worth cutting me out of Ethan's life completely? Worth lying to him that I was dead?" Amanda's composure finally cracked. "It wasn't just that day. It was every day since I married Daniel. Every visit where you made some comment about how different things were in your day. Every time you showed up in your sensible shoes and department store clothes among people in designer labels. Every story about my public school achievements or the summer I spent working at the ice cream shop instead of interning in Europe like Daniel did. Those were parts of your life," I said, bewildered. "Parts I thought you were proud of. I was trying to leave those parts behind," she cried. "Can't you understand that? I was building something new, something better for my family, for Ethan. And you were a constant reminder of the past I was trying to escape." The room fell silent, except for Amanda's ragged breathing. Ethan sat perfectly still beside me, his eyes wide as he witnessed his mother's raw emotion. "So after the party," I said finally, "when you told me not to contact you again, I meant it," she said, calmer now, but no less cold. "And when you continued to send cards and gifts, when you showed up at our house unannounced, when you hired a private investigator to find us after we moved, you were monitoring me?" I interrupted, shocked. "The PI you hired contacted Daniel's law firm first, as a professional courtesy," she explained with a bitter smile. "So yes, I knew about that pathetic attempt too." I felt sick. Every effort I had made to reconnect had only pushed her further away, confirmed her narrative of me as someone toxic, someone to escape. "When did you decide to tell Ethan I was dead?" I asked, the question that had haunted me since our encounter at the mall. Amanda looked away. "He was starting preschool. The teachers asked about grandparents for a family tree project. It was easier to say you had passed away than to explain the real situation." "Easier for who?" I asked softly. "Not for Ethan. You have no idea what's best for my son," she hissed. "You lost that right." "What about Grandma Spencer?" Ethan asked suddenly. "Is she really my grandma?" Amanda blinked, seemingly caught off guard by the question. "Of course she is. She's your father's mother. But she's not my only grandma," Ethan persisted. "You lied and said she was. Patricia has been more of a grandmother to you than my mother ever could be," Amanda said firmly. "She's involved in your education, your extracurriculars, your future. Because you wouldn't let me be involved," I pointed out. "Because you didn't fit the life I've built." Amanda's voice rose again. "Do you think Patricia would ever show up to a country club event in a hand-knit sweater? Or tell stories about financial struggles at a dinner with Daniel's firm partners? Or question our decision to enroll Ethan in prestigious summer programs instead of letting him just be a kid, like you?" Constantly suggested? Each example was like a knife twisting in my heart. Was this truly how she saw me? As an embarrassment? A liability? A threat to her carefully constructed social climbing? "So you decided I should be dead," I said flatly. "Not just absent, but dead." "It was cleaner that way," she admitted. "No questions." "Except you made Ethan visit a fake grave," I said, the horror of it still fresh. "You let him talk to a headstone, thinking it was me." For the first time, Amanda had the grace to look ashamed. "It wasn't a fake grave," she said quietly. "It's where Dad is buried. I just let Ethan assume it was for both of you." The revelation stunned me into silence. She had used Richard's grave, my husband's final resting place, as a prop in her elaborate lie, had told our grandson that I lay beside his grandfather, when she knew I had planned to be buried there someday, beside the love of my life. "That's sick, Amanda," I whispered, tears filling my eyes. "How could you?" Before she could answer, Ethan spoke up, his voice trembling but determined. "I don't want to leave Grandma," he announced. "I want to stay here." Amanda's face hardened immediately. "That's not happening. Get your backpack, Ethan. We're leaving. Now." "No," he cried, pressing against my side. "You lied to me. You made me think Grandma was dead. That's the worst lie ever. I did what I thought was best for you, Amanda insisted. And this conversation is proving exactly why I was right to keep her away from you. She's turning you against me already. I've done no such thing, I protested. I specifically told Ethan that you love him, and that he should be kind to you, even when he's upset about the lie. How magnanimous of you, Amanda sneered. Ethan, come here right now, or you'll be grounded for a month. No video games, no play dates, nothing. Ethan looked up at me, tears in his eyes. I don't want to go, he whispered. I know, sweetheart, I said gently, but you have to. She's your mother, a mother who's about to call the police if you don't stop trying to alienate my child, Amanda threatened, pulling out her phone. There's no need for that, I said quickly. Ethan, please go with your mom, but you know the truth now. You know I'm here, and I love you. Reluctantly, Ethan stood and collected his Spider-Man backpack from where he'd left it by the door. His small shoulders were slumped in defeat. This is the last time you'll see him, Amanda said coldly as Ethan walked to her side. I'm filing for a restraining order tomorrow. If you come near him or contact him in any way, I'll have you arrested. Amanda, please, I begged, standing despite my trembling legs. Don't do this to him. Don't do this to us. Family is too important to throw away over pride. This isn't about pride, she said, hand on the doorknob. It's about protecting my son from a toxic influence. The only toxic thing here is your lie, I said, finding strength in the truth. And now that Ethan knows it, do you really think you can keep pretending I don't exist? That I'm dead and buried? Something flickered in her eyes. Doubt, perhaps. But she squared her shoulders. Watch me, she said, and opened the door. As they stepped outside, Ethan looked back at me one last time, his eyes wide and wet with tears. I forced myself to smile, to show him strength rather than my breaking heart. I love you, Ethan, I called softly. I always have, and I always will. Remember that. Amanda yanked him forward, slamming my door behind them. Through the window, I watched them walk to the car, Amanda gripping Ethan's arm too tightly, her back rigid with fury. I watched them drive away, taking with them any hope I had for reconciliation, for a place in my grandson's life. It was the cruelest moment of my life, worse than Richard's death, worse than the day Amanda first cut me off, because this time, I had glimpsed a possibility of reconnection, only to have it snatched away with a threat of legal action, of arrest. I sank to my knees in the entryway of my home, the home where I had raised my daughter, where I had hoped to someday welcome my grandson regularly. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I allowed myself to sob without restraint, the sound of my grief filling the empty rooms where family should have been. 3 days passed, 3 days of silence in which I alternated between paralyzing grief and frantic worry. Had Amanda followed through on her threat of a restraining order? Was Ethan being punished for seeking me out? Had our brief reunion only made things worse for him? I called my old friend Judith, who had retired from practicing family law, but still had connections in the legal community. She promised to discreetly check if any restraining orders had been filed against me. Even if she does file, Maggie, Judith reassured me, she'd have a hard time making it stick. You haven't harassed her. The one encounter at the mall was accidental, and Ethan came to you the second time. Judges don't look kindly on parents who fabricate deaths to alienate children from grandparents. Her words were meant to comfort, but they brought little relief. The legal reality mattered less than the emotional one. Amanda had made it abundantly clear that she would go to any length to keep me separated from Ethan. On the 4th morning after Ethan's visit, I was sitting at my kitchen table, listlessly stirring a cup of tea that had gone cold, when my doorbell rang. My heart leaped to my throat. Could it be Ethan again? Or perhaps Amanda with legal papers? I opened the door to find a man in his early 40s, tall and professionally dressed in a button-down shirt and slacks. He looked vaguely familiar, though I couldn't place him. Mrs. Winters? He asked. Yes, I replied cautiously. I'm Daniel Spencer, Amanda's husband. He extended his hand, which I shook automatically, too surprised to do otherwise. May I come in? I think we need to talk. Daniel, my son-in-law, a man I had met perhaps a dozen times at formal events where we had exchanged pleasantries but never had a real conversation. The man who, according to Amanda, found my presence so uncomfortable, so undermining to their social position. Of course, I said, stepping back to let him enter. Would you like coffee? Tea? Coffee would be great, thanks. He followed me to the kitchen, glancing around my home with curious eyes. As I prepared the coffee, my mind raced with possibilities. Had Amanda sent him as her emissary to deliver the restraining order? Was this a good cop, bad cop routine, where he would try to convince me to stay away for Ethan's sake? I set a mug of coffee before him and took the seat opposite at my small kitchen table. I assume Amanda knows you're here. He grimaced slightly. Not exactly. This surprised me. Then why are you here, Daniel? He cupped his hands around the mug, staring into the dark liquid as if it might contain the right words. I'm here because my son has been crying himself to sleep for 3 nights straight, asking why his mother lied about his grandmother being dead. I'm here because Amanda is threatening to switch his school and move us to Chicago to get him away from you. I'm here because this situation has spiraled completely out of control, and someone needs to be the adult. I blinked, taken aback by his bluntness. And you think that someone is you? I think it needs to be all of us, he said, meeting my eyes. Look, Mrs. Winters. Maggie, please. Maggie. I know we don't know each other well. That's largely my fault. I allowed Amanda to control the narrative of your relationship, to limit our interactions. I didn't question when she gradually removed you from our lives. He sighed, running a hand through his dark hair streaked with early gray. I should have. I'm culpable in this mess too. His admission stunned me. This was not at all what I had expected from Daniel Spencer, heir to a Chicago banking fortune, product of generational wealth and privilege. Why are you really here? I asked, still suspicious. To understand, he said simply. To hear your side of things directly, not filtered through Amanda's perspective. I studied him, searching for signs of insincerity or manipulation. Finding none, I decided to be as honest with him as I had been with Ethan. Amanda is ashamed of me, I said quietly, of her upbringing, of our modest life. I embarrass her in front of your family, your colleagues. I represent a past she wants to forget. Daniel didn't deny it, which was telling. I think it's more complicated than that, he said carefully. I think she's terrified. Of what? Of being exposed, of being seen as an imposter in the world she's worked so hard to join. He took a sip of coffee. You have to understand, Maggie. The circles we move in, they're brutal in their judgment. The wrong word, the wrong reference, the wrong background story can mark you as an outsider forever. And I'm the wrong background story, I concluded. To Amanda, yes. He looked genuinely regretful. I never cared about that, for what it's worth. I fell in love with Amanda because she was different from the debutantes and trust fund kids I grew up with. She had fire, ambition, perspective. But somewhere along the way, she became obsessed with fitting in, with being accepted. By your mother, I couldn't help adding. Daniel smiled ruefully. My mother is a force of nature. And yes, Amanda desperately wanted her approval. But Patricia isn't the villain Amanda has made her out to be in this story. She actually asked about you constantly in the early years. Why doesn't Ethan's other grandmother visit more often? Shouldn't we invite her for the holidays? This revelation hit me like a physical blow. Amanda told me your mother thought I was inappropriate, embarrassing. Daniel shook his head. My mother can be a snob, no question. But she's also a grandmother who believes children should know their family. Amanda was the one who kept making excuses for your absence. The betrayal cut deeper than I had imagined. Amanda hadn't just been reacting to pressure from her in-laws. She had been the architect of my exclusion, creating a narrative that served her purposes. I had no idea, I whispered. Neither did I until recently, Daniel admitted. After the mall incident, when Ethan started asking questions, I pressed Amanda for the full story. What she told me didn't add up. And when Ethan ran away to find you, he paused, emotion crossing his face. That's when I realized how serious this was, how deeply Amanda's lie had hurt him, hurt you. Why did you allow it? I asked, the question that had burned in me for years. Why did you let her tell Ethan I was dead? Daniel looked ashamed. I didn't know she had gone that far, he said quietly. She told me she had explained to Ethan that you couldn't be in his life because you were unstable, that you had problems that made you unsafe to be around. Another lie, another character assassination. And you believe that? I didn't know you well enough not to, he admitted. Amanda painted a picture of a bitter, jealous woman who couldn't accept her daughter's success, who made scenes at family events, who showed up unannounced, making demands. None of that is true, I said, anger rising. I sent birthday cards that were returned. I called until my number was blocked. I hired a PI out of desperation, only to learn you'd moved without telling me. I did everything I could to maintain a relationship with my daughter and grandson without crossing into harassment. I believe you, Daniel said, surprising me again. Which is why I'm here. The truth needs to come out, for everyone's sake, but especially for Ethan's. I felt a flicker of hope, quickly tempered by caution. Amanda won't allow it. She's threatened a restraining order. She won't file, Daniel said with certainty. I've made that clear. As for what happens next, he hesitated. That's why I wanted to talk to you first, to see if there's a path forward that doesn't further traumatize our son. Our son, I repeated. Your son and Amanda's, not my grandson, according to her. That's not fair to Ethan, Daniel said firmly. He has a right to know his grandmother. And now that he does know you're alive, trying to keep you apart would only compound the damage Amanda has already done. I sat back, studying this man who had been a peripheral figure in my mind for years, a shadowy co-conspirator in Amanda's rejection of me. Now he sat at my kitchen table, offering what seemed like an olive branch, a chance at reconciliation. What exactly are you proposing? I asked. A truce, he said. Supervised visits with Ethan at first. Maybe once a week, at a neutral location, a park or a restaurant. Amanda won't like it, but she'll agree. How can you be so sure? His expression hardened slightly. Because I've made it clear that the alternative is family therapy, where all of this gets dragged into the open. The lie, the fake grave visits, all of it. Which would not only hurt Ethan more, but could impact Amanda's standing in the community if it got out. I understood then. Daniel was using the very thing Amanda valued most, her social reputation, as leverage to force her hand. It was calculating, even manipulative, but it might work. And what about Amanda and me? I asked. Do you expect us to pretend the past 5 years never happened? That she didn't tell my grandson I was dead? Daniel sighed. I don't expect miracles, Maggie. Amanda may never fully reconcile with you. Her issues run deep, deeper than I understood when we married. But she does love Ethan, and on some level, I believe she knows she's harmed him with this deception. Does she regret it? I had to ask. I don't know, he answered honestly. Right now, she's mostly angry and afraid. Angry that her carefully constructed narrative has fallen apart, afraid of the consequences. I thought about it, weighing the proposal. Supervised visits were less than I hoped for, but more than I had dared dream of after Amanda's threats. And perhaps, with time and patience, the wounds could begin to heal. I accept, I said finally. For Ethan's sake. Daniel nodded, relief visible in his shoulders. Thank you. I'll talk to Amanda tonight. Set things in motion. He hesitated. There's something else you should know. What's that? The day after Ethan ran away to find you, he told his teacher the whole story. About discovering you were alive. About the lie. The school counselor got involved. That's part of why Amanda is threatening to change schools. I closed my eyes briefly. Of course. The carefully crafted image was already cracking. I see. Amanda doesn't know this yet, but the counselor has called us in for a meeting tomorrow. Mandatory, given the nature of the situation. He met my gaze steadily. The truth is going to come out, Maggie, one way or another. I'm trying to give Amanda a chance to control the narrative one last time, to frame it as a family reconciliation rather than an exposure of her lie. It was, I realized, a kindness to Amanda despite everything, a chance for her to save face, to avoid the public humiliation she so feared. You're a better person than I would be in your position, I told him honestly. He smiled sadly. Don't give me too much credit. I let this happen under my nose for years. I'm just trying to fix it before it does any more damage to my son. As Daniel stood to leave, I felt something shift inside me. For 5 years, I had been trapped in grief and confusion, powerless to change my situation, at the mercy of Amanda's decisions. But now, unexpectedly, I had an ally, an opening, a chance. One more thing, Daniel said at the door. Would it be all right if I brought Ethan by this weekend? Just for an hour or so. A first step. The hope that surged through me was almost painful in its intensity. Yes, I managed to say through the emotion tightening my throat. I'd like that very much. After he left, I sat in my silent house, feeling something I hadn't experienced in years. Agency. The future was no longer entirely in Amanda's hands. I had options, choices. The power dynamic had shifted. For the first time since that terrible confrontation after Ethan's second birthday party, I wasn't just reacting to Amanda's cruelty or manipulations. I was being proactive, setting terms, finding my voice. It wasn't vengeance I wanted. It had never been about that. It was simply the right to exist in my grandson's life, the right to be acknowledged as his grandmother, not erased from his history. I picked up the phone and called Judith back. "I need your advice," I told her. "Not about restraining orders, about grandparents' rights, just in case." Knowledge was power, and while I hoped Daniel's intervention would lead to reconciliation, I was done being naive. Amanda had taught me the hard way that hope wasn't enough. Sometimes you needed leverage. I was awake now, clear-eyed about what I was facing, what was at stake, and I would never again be passive in the face of Amanda's attempts to erase me. For Ethan's sake, and for my own, I would fight for my place in his life, with compassion but unwavering determination. The grandmother who had been declared dead was very much alive, and she had no intention of disappearing again. The day after Daniel's unexpected visit, I was pulling weeds in my front garden when a silver BMW I didn't recognize pulled into my driveway. A woman emerged, elegant, silver-haired, dressed in a cream linen pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Patricia Spencer. My heart raced as I straightened up, brushing soil from my gardening gloves. This was Amanda's mother-in-law, the woman she had positioned as my replacement, the appropriate grandmother who fit the narrative of Ethan's privileged life. "Mrs. Winters?" she called, walking toward me with the confident stride of someone accustomed to commanding attention. "I hope you don't mind my dropping by unannounced. I'm Patricia Spencer. I know who you are," I replied, removing my gloves. "And it's Maggie, please." She nodded, glancing at my dirt-smudged jeans and faded t-shirt without obvious judgment. "Then I insist you call me Patricia. May we speak inside? What I have to say is rather private." Curious despite my apprehension, I led her into my home, acutely aware of its modest furnishings compared to what she must be accustomed to. If she noticed, she gave no indication, accepting my offer of iced tea and sitting gracefully on my worn sofa. "I imagine you're wondering why I'm here," she began, accepting the glass I offered. "The thought crossed my mind," I admitted, taking the armchair opposite her. "Daniel told me about his visit to you yesterday," she said. "He didn't go into details, but he mentioned that he's trying to facilitate some sort of reconciliation between you, Amanda, and Ethan." I nodded cautiously, unsure where this was going. Had Patricia come to oppose the plan, to defend her position as Ethan's only grandmother? "What Daniel doesn't know," she continued, her voice lowering slightly, "is that I've been aware of Amanda's fabrication for quite some time." I stared at her, stunned. "You knew she told Ethan I was dead?" Patricia nodded, genuine regret in her eyes. "Not at first. It happened gradually. When Ethan was about 3, he mentioned his grandma in heaven during a visit to our home in Chicago. I assumed he was referring to some distant relative. But then at Grandparents' Day at his preschool the following year, he explicitly told his teacher that his maternal grandmother, you, had died of cancer. And you didn't question this?" I couldn't keep the accusation from my voice. "I did, actually," she said, surprising me. "I asked Amanda about it privately. She told me that you had been diagnosed with terminal cancer shortly after Ethan's second birthday and had chosen to spend your final months in hospice care, away from family." The elaborate lie took my breath away. "And you believed her?" "I had no reason not to at the time," Patricia replied. "I barely knew you. We'd met only a handful of times at formal events where we exchanged pleasantries. Amanda had always been vague about why you didn't visit more often. When she told me you had died, I sent flowers to what I believed was your funeral service." "Flowers," I repeated numbly. "To my funeral. To what I thought was your funeral," she corrected. "I even made a donation to the American Cancer Society in your name." The surreal nature of the conversation made me feel slightly dizzy. Here was this woman, discussing my fictional death and funeral as if it were a minor social misunderstanding rather than a profound betrayal. "When did you discover the truth?" I asked. Patricia set her glass down carefully on a coaster. "About 2 years ago. I was in town for Ethan's school play. Amanda had a work emergency, so I took him to visit what he called Grandma Maggie's grave. I was moved by his attachment to you, by the way he insisted on bringing fresh flowers even though he had no conscious memory of you. She paused, seemingly collecting herself. The cemetery was Forest Lawn. I noticed the headstone he stood before had the name Richard Winters, not Margaret. When I gently asked about it, Ethan explained that you and his grandfather were buried together, but only Grandpa's name was on the stone. Patricia looked directly at me, her blue eyes clear and unflinching. Later that evening, I looked up records for Forest Lawn Cemetery. There was indeed a Richard Winters buried there, deceased 2010, but no Margaret Winters. So I did what any concerned grandmother would do. I started digging deeper. You investigated me, I said, not a question. I investigated the situation, she corrected. It took one phone call to a friend at the Springfield Library Board to confirm that Margaret Winters, former children's librarian, was very much alive and volunteering at the senior center 3 days a week. I felt a strange mix of emotions. Violation at being investigated, relief that someone had discovered the truth, anger that Patricia had known for 2 years and apparently done nothing about it. And you didn't confront Amanda? I asked. You didn't try to contact me? Patricia sighed, genuine regret crossing her elegant features. I did confront Amanda. She broke down, admitted the lie, and begged me not to tell Daniel or Ethan. She claimed you had been unstable, intrusive, that you'd tried to undermine her marriage and her relationship with our family, that you'd shown up unannounced at their home, making scenes, that the lie had started as a temporary solution during a difficult time, but had snowballed beyond her control. Each accusation felt like a knife twist. None of that is true, I said quietly. I know that now, Patricia acknowledged. But at the time, I didn't know you, and I did know that Amanda was a devoted mother who seemed genuinely distressed. She promised to gradually transition to the truth, to tell Ethan you had been very sick but had recovered, to eventually reintroduce you into his life. But she never did, I concluded. No. Whenever I asked, there was always some reason to delay. Ethan was going through a sensitive phase. You had supposedly threatened legal action. There was always some new drama that made it the wrong time. Patricia's mouth tightened in displeasure. I allowed myself to be manipulated, and for that, I owe you an apology. An apology. From Patricia Spencer to me, the world had truly turned upside down. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because things have reached a breaking point, she said simply. Because Ethan knows the truth, and he's devastated by the betrayal. Because Amanda is spiraling, threatening to move my grandson to Chicago to keep him away from you, which would also separate him from his father, since Daniel refuses to leave his law practice here. Daniel didn't mention that part, I said, alarmed. Daniel is trying to protect everyone. Ethan, Amanda, you, himself, Patricia said with a hint of exasperation. It's admirable, but ultimately ineffective. Sometimes the truth simply needs to come out, messy as it might be. She reached into her handbag and removed a manila envelope, placing it on the coffee table between us. What's this? I asked. Evidence, she replied. Emails, text messages, notes from Ethan's school counselor that Daniel doesn't know I have access to. Documentation of Amanda's deliberate campaign to erase you from Ethan's life, including her explicit instructions to school staff never to allow you near him, because you were, quote, a mentally unstable woman who believes she's his grandmother. I stared at the envelope, afraid to touch it, afraid of the pain its contents would inflict. Why would you give this to me? Patricia's expression softened slightly. Because you deserve to know the full extent of what you're dealing with. Because Amanda's narrative about you being the unstable one needs to be definitively disproven before any reconciliation can happen. And because, frankly, I refuse to allow my grandson to be used as a pawn in whatever personal demons Amanda is battling. I reached out slowly and picked up the envelope, feeling its weight, physical and metaphorical. Does Daniel know you're giving me this? No, she admitted, and he wouldn't approve. He still believes we can resolve this privately, within the family. But you don't? Patricia sighed, suddenly looking every one of her 70 years. I've lived long enough to know that some wounds can't be healed without first being thoroughly cleansed. The infection has to be drawn out, painful as that process might be. She leaned forward slightly. Maggie, I need you to understand something. I never intended to replace you in Ethan's life. I didn't know I was doing so. Had I known you were alive and well, I would have insisted on your inclusion in family events, regardless of Amanda's objections. Why? I couldn't help asking. We're from different worlds. Amanda made it clear I didn't fit into yours. Because family is family, she said simply. My own mother was a seamstress in a Chicago department store. My father drove a delivery truck. They didn't fit into the world I married into either, but my husband's family never excluded them. That's not how decent people behave. I studied her face, looking for signs of insincerity or manipulation, but finding none. This refined, wealthy woman seemed genuinely offended by the idea that social status should determine family inclusion. What do you want from me? I asked finally. I want you to use that information if you need to, she said, indicating the envelope. Not to destroy Amanda. She's still my grandson's mother and my son's wife, but to establish the truth definitively, to ensure that any reconciliation is based on reality, not more convenient fictions. And what about Amanda? She'll see this as the ultimate betrayal from both of us. Patricia's expression hardened slightly. Amanda needs help, not enabling. She's created an elaborate fantasy world where her origins are a source of shame, where you're a villain threatening her carefully constructed image. That's not healthy for her, for Ethan, or for anyone involved. You make it sound like she's mentally ill, I said uncertainly. I'm not qualified to make that assessment, Patricia replied carefully. But I am qualified to recognize when someone is causing harm to a child I love. Ethan deserves to know his grandmother, his real, living grandmother. And if Amanda can't find a way to facilitate that relationship, then she needs to step aside and let others do so. The conviction in Patricia's voice was startling. This wasn't the snobbish society matron Amanda had described, looking down on my middle-class background. This was a grandmother fiercely protective of her grandson's emotional well-being, regardless of social conventions or family politics. I don't want to hurt Amanda, I said softly. Despite everything, she's still my daughter. I know, Patricia said, her voice gentler. That's why I'm trusting you with this information. You'll use it judiciously, as a last resort, not as a weapon of first choice. Daniel would have tried to handle everything behind closed doors, protecting Amanda's reputation at all costs. That approach has enabled her behavior for too long. She stood to leave, smoothing her linen slacks. The school counselor has called for a meeting tomorrow morning. Amanda, Daniel, and the principal will be there. You should be too. I wasn't invited, I pointed out. You will be, she said, with the confidence of someone accustomed to arrangements falling into place according to her wishes. I've already spoken to the principal about the importance of having all grandparents present, given the nature of the situation. As I walked Patricia to the door, a question that had been nagging at me finally found voice. Why did you really come here today? It wasn't just to give me that envelope. She paused on my porch, considering the question. I came because I wanted to meet you, the real you, not the version Amanda described. I wanted to look you in the eye and determine for myself whether you were someone who should be in my grandson's life. And? I asked, holding my breath slightly. Patricia smiled, a genuine warmth replacing her previous formal demeanor, and I found exactly what I expected. A woman who loves her grandson enough to put his well-being above her own hurt feelings. A woman who, despite years of cruel exclusion, still speaks of her daughter with concern rather than bitterness. In short, Maggie, I found a grandmother Ethan is lucky to have, whether Amanda can recognize that or not. With that, she walked to her car, leaving me standing on my porch with the manila envelope in my hand and a strange new feeling in my heart. Hope? Yes, but also something more powerful. Validation, allyship, and the knowledge that the truth, so long buried under Amanda's elaborate lies, was finally coming to light. Inside the envelope, I found page after page documenting Amanda's deception. Emails to Ethan's school explicitly forbidding any contact from me, describing me as a delusional woman claiming to be a relation. Text messages between Amanda and Daniel where she spun tales of my supposed unstable behavior. A letter to the cemetery management requesting that Richard's grave be referred to as the grandparents' plot when Ethan visited. Notes from the school counselor expressing concern about Ethan's confusion and distress after discovering I was alive. Most devastating of all was a draft of a restraining order Amanda had prepared but never filed, filled with false accusations, that I had stalked her, threatened her, attempted to kidnap Ethan. The document was dated just after our mall encounter, ready to be submitted if I had tried to contact them. I sat at my kitchen table. The evidence of my daughter's betrayal spread before me, and wept, not just for myself, but for Amanda. What kind of pain and insecurity drove a person to such elaborate deception? To maintain a fiction that her mother was dead, rather than simply explain a family estrangement? To create a fictional gravesite? To coach a child to speak to a headstone as if his grandmother lay beneath it? And yet, amid the pain, I felt a strange sense of liberation. For years, I had questioned my own perceptions, wondered if I had somehow misunderstood or exaggerated Amanda's rejection. The evidence before me confirmed that my experience had been real. The gaslighting, the exclusion, the character assassination. It had all happened, just as I remembered it. The question now was what to do with this knowledge, how to use it to secure my place in Ethan's life, without further damaging my fragile relationship with Amanda, how to move forward with truth as our foundation, rather than convenient lies. I carefully returned the documents to the envelope and placed it in my desk drawer. Then I called the number Patricia had written on her business card. "I'll be at the school meeting tomorrow," I told her when she answered. "But I need you to know something. I won't use those documents unless I have absolutely no alternative. I still believe there's a chance for healing without further humiliation." "I hope you're right," Patricia replied, "for everyone's sake. But if you're not," she paused. "The truth is already out there, Maggie. The only question is who controls how it's revealed, and what happens afterward." As I hung up, I realized I was standing at a crossroads. One path led to confrontation, to using Patricia's evidence to force Amanda to acknowledge her lies. The other offered the possibility of reconciliation, of healing the wounds without reopening them first. The choice would depend not on me, but on Amanda, on whether she could finally face the truth about what she had done, and why. The morning of the school meeting, I woke before dawn after a fitful night's sleep. Bright Heights Elementary was an imposing structure of glass and brick in an affluent suburb, the kind of school I could never have afforded for Amanda on a librarian's salary, the kind that boasted a full-time counselor, a mindfulness garden, and French lessons starting in kindergarten. I dressed with particular care in my best navy pantsuit, outdated by high-end standards but well-maintained, dignified. I wasn't trying to compete with Amanda's designer wardrobe or Patricia's elegant ensembles. I simply wanted to look like what I was, a respectable grandmother who deserved to be taken seriously. Before leaving, I stood before the mirror in my hallway, studying my reflection. The woman who looked back at me had changed over these 5 years of enforced separation from Ethan. Silver had completely replaced the auburn in my hair. Lines had deepened around my eyes and mouth. But there was something different today, a resolve in my posture, a clarity in my gaze that had been missing for too long. "You have nothing to be ashamed of," I told my reflection firmly. "Nothing to apologize for. Remember that." On the drive to the school, I mentally rehearsed what I might say, how I might respond to Amanda's likely accusations. I had decided not to bring Patricia's envelope of evidence unless absolutely necessary. This wasn't about exposing Amanda or punishing her. It was about establishing the truth and securing my relationship with Ethan, going forward. I arrived 15 minutes early, parking my 10-year-old Honda in a lot filled with luxury SUVs and European sedans. The school's front office was hushed and efficient, with a receptionist who eyed my visitor badge with barely concealed suspicion. "The meeting is in the conference room," she informed me. "Principal Hargrove and Mrs. Klein from counseling are already there." I followed her directions down a hallway lined with children's artwork, each piece meticulously matted and labeled. At the end of the corridor, a door stood open to a bright room with a round table. 2 women looked up as I entered, one in her 50s with a sensible bob and glasses, the other younger with a kind face and curly hair. "Mrs. Winters?" The older woman rose, extending her hand. "I'm Carolyn Hargrove, Ethan's principal. This is Rebecca Klein, our school counselor. Thank you for coming on such short notice." "Thank you for including me," I replied, shaking both their hands. "Please, have a seat." Ms. Klein gestured to the table. "The Spencers should be arriving shortly." I chose a seat facing the door, oddly calm despite the impending confrontation. I had waited 5 years for this moment, the chance to speak openly about what had happened, to advocate for my place in Ethan's life. "While we wait," Ms. Klein began gently, I want to assure you that our only concern here is Ethan's emotional well-being. This situation has obviously been extremely confusing and distressing for him. I can imagine, I said. Finding out his mother lied about his grandmother being dead. It's a lot for a 7-year-old to process. Principal Hargrove nodded, her expression carefully neutral. Ethan shared quite a detailed account with Ms. Klein. We'd like to hear your perspective as well, if you're comfortable. Of course, I said. What would you like to know? Perhaps you could start by explaining the nature of the estrangement between you and your daughter, Ms. Klein suggested. When did it begin, and why? I took a deep breath, organizing my thoughts. The issues began when Amanda married Daniel, though I didn't recognize the severity at the time. She became increasingly distant, embarrassed by her background, by me. Things came to a head at Ethan's second birthday party, where Amanda felt I had humiliated her in front of Daniel's colleagues and family with comments about our modest lifestyle. I explained the gradual exclusion, the returned cards, the blocked calls. The principal and counselor exchanged glances but didn't interrupt. I never knew she had told Ethan I was dead until our chance encounter at the mall a week ago, I concluded. It was as shocking to me as it was to him. And you had no contact with Ethan during these 5 years? Principal Hargrove asked. None. Amanda made it clear that any attempt to contact him would result in legal action against me. Ms. Klein made a note on her pad. Ethan mentioned visiting a grave he believed was yours. Were you aware of this practice? Not until Ethan told me himself when he came to my house. I swallowed hard. Apparently, Amanda used my late husband's gravesite, letting Ethan believe I was buried there too. Both women's expressions registered appropriate shock at this detail. Before they could respond, voices sounded in the hallway. Amanda's sharp tones, Daniel's deeper murmur, and the unmistakable cultured cadence of Patricia Spencer. All three entered together. Amanda, tense and immaculately dressed in a cream suit that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Daniel, somber in a charcoal business suit. And Patricia, serene in navy silk, nodding to me with subtle encouragement. Amanda stopped short when she saw me, color draining from her face. What is she doing here? She demanded of the principal. This meeting was supposed to be about Ethan's emotional support needs, which is precisely why Mrs. Winters needed to be included. Principal Hargrove replied firmly. Please have a seat, all of you. Daniel guided Amanda to a chair directly opposite me, while Patricia took the seat to my right, a subtle but clear indication of allegiance that wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Now, Principal Hargrove began once everyone was settled. I want to establish some ground rules. We're here to discuss what's best for Ethan moving forward, not to assign blame or rehash past grievances. Ms. Klein will guide our discussion with that goal in mind. Amanda's posture was rigid, her hands clasped so tightly on the table that her knuckles were white. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Ethan has expressed significant distress, Ms. Klein began gently, not only about discovering his grandmother is alive, but about being lied to by his mother. He's questioning what else might not be true, which is developmentally concerning for a child his age. This is a private family matter, Amanda interjected. We're addressing it at home. With all due respect, Mrs. Spencer, Ms. Klein continued, when a child brings these concerns to school, when it affects his emotional state and academic performance, it becomes our concern as well. Ethan has been unable to focus in class, has been withdrawn at recess, and yesterday had what appeared to be a panic attack during story time. Daniel looked alarmed. You didn't tell me about that, he said to Amanda. It wasn't a panic attack, Amanda dismissed. He was upset about forgetting his show-and-tell item. He became distressed when the story mentioned a grandmother, Ms. Klein clarified. He began crying and saying, She's not really dead, Mom lied. His classmates were understandably confused and concerned. Amanda flushed, looking trapped. This is exactly why we're considering changing schools, she muttered. Running away won't solve the underlying issue, Patricia said, speaking for the first time. Ethan knows the truth now. The question is how we all move forward in a way that supports him. And who invited you to this meeting? Amanda snapped at her mother-in-law. I did, Principal Hargrove interjected smoothly. As Ethan's grandmother and a significant figure in his life, Mrs. Spencer's input is valuable. Then I want my father here too, Amanda said petulantly. A heavy silence fell. Daniel cleared his throat uncomfortably. Patricia looked at me with sympathy. Amanda, I said gently, your father passed away 15 years ago. You know that. Her eyes finally met mine, blazing with a mixture of anger and something else. Shame, perhaps. Exactly, she hissed. He's dead. Actually dead. Not pretending to be dead to manipulate a child. That's enough, Daniel said sharply. You're the one who created this situation, Amanda. You don't get to play the victim now. Ms. Klein raised a hand. Let's refocus on what's best for Ethan. He has expressed a strong desire to have his grandmother, she nodded toward me, in his life. Given the circumstances, we believe this relationship should be supported, not obstructed. She'll try to turn him against me, Amanda insisted. She'll tell him things about me, about our past. What things, Amanda? I asked quietly. What are you so afraid of him knowing? She fell silent, unable or unwilling to articulate her fears. Perhaps, Ms. Klein suggested, we could discuss a gradual reintegration plan. Supervised visits at first, in a neutral setting, building to more regular contact as everyone adjusts. That's essentially what I proposed to Maggie earlier this week, Daniel confirmed. I think it's a reasonable approach. And who would supervise these visits? Amanda demanded. You? My mother-in-law, who's clearly taken her side. I have no side except Ethan's, Patricia replied calmly. And he deserves to know his grandmother, his real, living grandmother. Amanda flinched at the pointed comment. The supervision could be professional at first, Ms. Klein offered. I'd be willing to facilitate initial meetings here at the school, in a comfortable, neutral environment. I nodded. I'm open to whatever arrangement makes everyone feel comfortable. My only goal is to be part of Ethan's life again. And then what? Amanda challenged. You'll start filling his head with stories about what a deprived childhood I had? How I've supposedly rejected my roots? Turned my back on my upbringing? Is that what you think I want? I asked, genuinely surprised. To make you look bad in Ethan's eyes? Amanda, I just want to be his grandmother. I have no interest in undermining your relationship with him. You already have, she shot back. He looks at me differently now, like he doesn't trust me anymore. That's the consequence of lying to him, Daniel said bluntly. Not of your mother being in his life. Amanda turned on him. Whose side are you on? Our sons, he replied firmly. Always our sons. Principal Hargrove cleared her throat. I think we need to be practical here. Mrs. Winters has every legal and moral right to a relationship with her grandson. The question is not whether this will happen, but how it will happen. With your cooperation, Mrs. Spencer, or despite your objections. The clarity of the principal's position seemed to take Amanda aback. She had clearly expected the school to defer to her as the parent. Are you threatening me? She asked, voice rising. No one is threatening anyone, Ms. Klein intervened. But we are concerned about Ethan's emotional health. Children need stability, honesty, and connection to their family members. The deception about Mrs. Winters being deceased has already caused significant harm. Continuing to obstruct their relationship would likely compound that harm. I watched Amanda's face as the reality of her situation began to sink in. She was losing control of the narrative she had so carefully constructed. The fiction of her mother's death, of her own exclusive right to shape Ethan's understanding of family, was crumbling before her eyes. Perhaps, Patricia suggested gently, Amanda needs some time to process all this. It's a significant adjustment for everyone involved. I recognized the lifeline being thrown to my daughter and decided to extend one of my own. I want to be clear about something, I said, looking directly at Amanda. I have no interest in punishing you or humiliating you. I understand that you were trying to create what you thought was a better life for Ethan, a cleaner narrative without the complications of family discord. But he's old enough now to understand that families are complex, that adults sometimes disagree but can still care about each other. How magnanimous of you, Amanda muttered, but some of the fight seemed to be leaving her. It's not magnanimity, I corrected. It's love. For you and for Ethan. Despite everything, Amanda, you're still my daughter. And I still love you. I always have. She looked away, blinking rapidly, and I realized with surprise that she was fighting tears. Ms. Klein seized the opening. What if we start very small? Perhaps Mrs. Winters could attend Ethan's soccer game this weekend, seated separately from the family, no pressure for interaction, just allowing Ethan to see that all the adults in his life can be present without conflict. Daniel nodded. That seems reasonable. Amanda? After a long moment, Amanda gave a jerky nod, not trusting herself to speak. Excellent, Principal Hargrove said with evident relief. And perhaps the following week, a brief supervised visit here at school during lunch hour. Ms. Klein can be present the entire time. Again, Amanda nodded, though less reluctantly this time. I think we're making progress, Ms. Klein smiled. The most important thing is that Ethan sees the adults in his life working together, moving past the deception toward a healthier family dynamic. As the meeting concluded with practical details of times and expectations, I felt a curious lightness. Not euphoria. There was too much pain and too many obstacles ahead for that, but hope. Genuine hope that a path forward was emerging from the wreckage of Amanda's elaborate lie. In the parking lot afterward, Patricia fell into step beside me. That went better than expected, she observed. Yes, I agreed, though I doubt Amanda sees it that way. She will, eventually, Patricia said with confidence. Once she realizes you truly don't intend to use this situation against her. I never did, I said softly. Patricia smiled. I know. That's why I gave you that envelope. I knew you wouldn't use it unless absolutely necessary. Do you think it will be? I asked, glancing back at the school where Amanda and Daniel were still speaking with the principal. I don't think so, Patricia replied thoughtfully. Amanda's primary concern has always been her image, her social standing. Now that the school is involved, now that Ethan has spoken openly about the situation, she knows she can't control the narrative anymore. Her best option is to embrace reconciliation as a positive development rather than continue fighting a battle she's already lost. As I drove home, I reflected on Patricia's assessment. Amanda had always been image conscious, even as a teenager, but never to this pathological degree. Something had changed when she married Daniel, when she entered his world of privilege and status. Some deep insecurity had taken root, growing into a tangle of lies and manipulations that ultimately harmed the person she most wanted to protect, her son. I wondered if reconciliation with me might eventually help her reconcile with herself as well, with the parts of her history and identity she had been so desperate to erase. Perhaps that was too much to hope for. But as I had learned in these tumultuous days, hope had a way of appearing in the most unexpected places. The next step would be seeing Ethan at his soccer game, being present without pressure, showing him that the adults in his life could coexist peacefully despite the complicated history between us. It was a small beginning, but beginnings were, by definition, the start of something new. And after 5 years in the wilderness of exclusion, declared dead and erased from my grandson's narrative, even the smallest beginning felt like resurrection. Saturday dawned clear and crisp, perfect weather for a youth soccer game. I arrived at the community fields 30 minutes early, butterflies dancing in my stomach. This would be the first time seeing Ethan in a normal setting since our emotional reunion at my house, the first step in rebuilding a relationship that Amanda's lie had severed. I chose a seat at the far end of the bleachers, as agreed during our school meeting, close enough to see the game clearly, far enough from the team's designated parent section to avoid any uncomfortable proximity to Amanda. I had dressed casually but neatly in jeans, a light sweater, and a jacket against the morning chill. In my tote bag, I carried a small thermos of hot chocolate, remembering how Ethan had enjoyed it at my house. The youth teams began to arrive, children in matching uniforms spilling from minivans and SUVs, parents carrying folding chairs and coolers. I scanned the parking lot anxiously, looking for Amanda's white Lexus or Daniel's black BMW. Instead, I spotted Patricia's silver car. She emerged, elegant even in casual clothes, followed by Ethan in his blue and white uniform. My heart leaped at the sight of him, his small face serious as he carried his sports bag. No sign of Amanda or Daniel. Patricia spotted me and gave a discreet wave before guiding Ethan toward the team gathering area. She said something to him, pointing subtly in my direction. His head turned, eyes searching until they found me. Even from a distance, I could see his face light up. He gave a tentative wave, which I returned, fighting the urge to run to him and envelop him in a hug. Patience, I reminded myself. Small steps. As the teams warmed up, Patricia made her way to the bleachers, climbing to sit beside me. Daniel got called into the office for an emergency, she explained. Some crisis with a corporate client. And Amanda? I asked, already suspecting the answer. Patricia's mouth tightened slightly. Migraine, or so she says. I nodded, unsurprised but disappointed. How's Ethan handling everything? Better than you might expect, Patricia replied, watching her grandson dribble a ball down the field. Children are remarkably resilient, and he's excited you're here. Wouldn't stop talking about it all morning. Warmth bloomed in my chest. "I've missed so much," I said softly. "Yes," Patricia acknowledged, "but you're here now. That's what matters going forward." The game began. Parents cheering as small bodies raced across the field with more enthusiasm than skill. Ethan played midfielder, serious and focused in a way that reminded me of Amanda at his age. When he scored a goal in the second quarter, his teammates swarmed him with high fives. He turned toward the bleachers, eyes finding me first. Then Patricia, his smile wide and joyful. I clapped and cheered, tears stinging my eyes at this simple moment of connection, of being acknowledged as someone who mattered in his world. At halftime, Patricia nudged me gently. "He wants you to come down to the sidelines. The team gets orange slices and water. It's fine if you're there too." Heart racing, I followed her down to the area where sweaty, excited children gulped water and compared grass stains. Ethan broke away from his teammates when he saw us approaching. "Grandma Patricia, Grandma Maggie, did you see my goal?" he asked, bouncing on his toes. "We certainly did," Patricia smiled. "Excellent footwork. It was wonderful," I added. "You're a very talented player." He beamed, then looked between us with a sudden seriousness beyond his years. "I'm glad you both came. Mom said she was too sick, and Dad had to work. Your mother doesn't feel well today," Patricia said smoothly, "but she wanted us to cheer extra loud for you." I doubted Amanda had said any such thing, but appreciated Patricia's effort to preserve Ethan's relationship with his mother. "Are you coming to pizza after?" Ethan asked me directly. "The team always goes to Sal's Pizza after games." I hesitated, looking to Patricia for guidance. This hadn't been part of our carefully negotiated arrangement. "I think that would be lovely," Patricia said before I could respond. "We can all go together." "Really?" Ethan's face lit up again. "Really," I confirmed, silently thanking Patricia for her support. The coach called the team back to the field for the second half. As Ethan ran off, he called over his shoulder, "Watch me, Grandma Maggie. I'll score another one for you." Grandma Maggie, the name I had been denied for 5 years, spoken with such natural affection. I blinked back tears as we returned to our seats. "Thank you," I said quietly to Patricia, "for including me in the pizza plan." "It's what Ethan wants," she replied simply. And at this point, his emotional well-being takes precedence over Amanda's discomfort. The second half passed in a blur of small bodies chasing the ball, parents cheering, coaches calling instructions. Ethan's team won 3-2, though he didn't manage another goal. As the players gathered for a post-game team cheer, I saw a familiar white Lexus pull into the parking lot. Amanda had arrived. "Oh dear," Patricia murmured, following my gaze. "It seems the migraine has miraculously lifted." I tensed, watching Amanda emerge from her car, designer sunglasses hiding her eyes despite the overcast day. She scanned the field, spotting Ethan with his team, then turned toward the bleachers. Even from a distance, I could see her body stiffen when she noticed Patricia and me sitting together. "Perhaps I should go," I suggested. "This wasn't part of the agreement." "Nonsense," Patricia said firmly. "You were invited to watch the game, and you did. What happens now is between Amanda and her son." We watched as Amanda approached Ethan, who was collecting his gear. His excited chatter was visible even from a distance, likely telling her about the game and his goal. Then he pointed toward us on the bleachers, saying something that made Amanda's posture go rigid. "Here we go," Patricia murmured. Amanda took Ethan's hand and began walking toward us, her stride purposeful. As they approached, I could see the tight set of her jaw beneath the large sunglasses. "Mother," she acknowledged Patricia coolly. "I thought Daniel explained he had to work today." "He did," Patricia replied calmly. "That's why I brought Ethan to his game, as his grandmother." "Mom!" Ethan interrupted excitedly. "Grandma Maggie saw my goal, and she's coming to pizza with us. Isn't that cool?" Amanda's mouth tightened. "Ethan, I think we'll skip pizza today." "I'm not feeling well, remember?" His face fell. "But you're here now, and the whole team is going. We can have pizza at home," she countered. "It's not the same," he protested. "Everyone's going to Sal's, and Grandma Maggie already said she'd come." Amanda removed her sunglasses, her eyes cold as they met mine. "That wasn't part of our arrangement." Before I could respond, Ethan spoke again, his voice small but determined. "Is this because you lied about Grandma Maggie being dead?" The blunt question hung in the air between us. Amanda's face flushed deep red. Several nearby parents turned at Ethan's words, poorly disguising their interest in this family drama. "Ethan, we don't discuss private family matters in public," Amanda hissed. "But you did lie," he persisted. "And now you're being mean to Grandma Maggie again." "Why?" Amanda looked around, clearly mortified by the attention Ethan's questions were attracting. This was her worst fear realized: public exposure of her deception, judgment from the community she had worked so hard to impress. "Perhaps," Patricia interjected smoothly, "we could all go to pizza as Ethan's team expects, and save this discussion for a more private setting. Or," I suggested gently, "Amanda and Ethan could have their special time together, and we could arrange another opportunity for me to spend time with Ethan. The school counselor mentioned lunch next week." I was offering her an escape route, a way to save face in front of the other parents. Amanda's eyes met mine, surprise flickering across her features at my willingness to step back. Before she could respond, Ethan tugged at her hand. "Please, Mom. I want all my grandmas at pizza, and I scored a goal. Please." His simple plea seemed to deflate something in Amanda. Perhaps she realized that continuing to resist would only draw more attention, create more questions. Or perhaps, seeing her son's earnest face, she simply didn't have the heart to disappoint him further. "Fine," she said tightly. "Just for a little while." Ethan's face brightened instantly. "Awesome. I'm going to tell Coach you're all coming." He dashed off toward his team, leaving the three of us in an uncomfortable tableau. "Thank you, Amanda," I said quietly. "This means a lot to Ethan." "I'm doing it for him," she replied coldly. "Not for you." "I know," I acknowledged. "And that's as it should be. He's what matters most." Something shifted in her expression, not softening exactly, but perhaps surprise at my lack of triumphalism. She had expected me to gloat over this small victory, to use Ethan's clear desire for my presence as a weapon against her. My refusal to do so seemed to unsettle her more than any confrontation would have. "We'll meet you at Sal's," she said abruptly, turning to walk back to her car. Patricia and I exchanged glances. "Progress of a sort," she murmured. "Or just damage control," I replied, watching Amanda's retreating back. "Sometimes they're the same thing," Patricia observed wisely. Sal's Pizza was crowded with young soccer players and their families, the air filled with chatter and the smell of cheese and tomato sauce. I found myself seated at a long table between Patricia and Ethan, with Amanda across from us, still wearing her sunglasses indoors, a clear signal of her desire to maintain emotional distance. Ethan, oblivious to the undercurrents of tension, chattered happily about the game, the season standings, his teammates' new cleats. I listened attentively, asking questions, marveling at how naturally he included me in the conversation, despite our years of separation. "Grandma Maggie," he said suddenly during a lull, "do you like soccer? Did Mom play when she was little like me?" Amanda tensed across the table. Here it was, the first direct question about her childhood, the past she had tried to erase. "Your mom played softball, actually," I said carefully. "She was an excellent pitcher. I have photos somewhere of her team when they won the regional championship." "Really?" Ethan looked at Amanda with newfound interest. "You never told me you played softball, Mom." Amanda shifted uncomfortably. "It was a long time ago." "You were quite the athlete," I continued, keeping my tone light, reminiscent rather than accusatory. "You played softball in spring, soccer in fall, and basketball in winter. Your dad used to say you had more energy than the Energizer Bunny." A ghost of a smile touched Amanda's lips before she suppressed it. "Dad always exaggerated," she murmured. "Not about that," I replied gently. "You were always in motion." "Did my grandpa come to your games too?" Ethan asked Amanda directly. A charged silence fell at our section of the table. The question was innocent, but loaded with implications. Ethan knew now that Richard Winters was his grandfather, that the grave he had visited belonged to him alone. He was trying to construct a mental image of a family history that had been denied to him. "Yes," Amanda said finally, her voice softer than I had heard it in years. "Dad never missed a game, even when he was busy with school concerts or band practice. He'd reschedule his students' lessons to be there. It was the first time she had voluntarily shared a memory of her father with Ethan, at least in my presence. The first acknowledgement of our shared past that wasn't tinged with resentment or rejection. "He sounds nice," Ethan said thoughtfully. "He was," Amanda and I replied simultaneously. Our eyes met across the table, and for a brief moment, the years of estrangement seemed to fall away. We were simply a mother and daughter remembering a beloved husband and father. Amanda looked away first, but not before I glimpsed something vulnerable in her expression. The pizza arrived, temporarily shifting focus to the logistics of serving excited children. As the meal progressed, I noticed Amanda gradually removing herself from the conversation, responding minimally when addressed, checking her phone frequently. When Ethan went with his teammates to play the arcade games in the back of the restaurant, Amanda finally spoke directly to me, her voice low and tense. "This doesn't change anything fundamental," she said. "I'm allowing these visits for Ethan's sake, but we are not reconciling." Is that clear? The coldness in her tone was at odds with the flicker of shared memory I had glimpsed earlier. It was as if she felt the need to reinforce the walls between us after that brief moment of connection. "I understand," I replied calmly. "I'm not asking for reconciliation, Amanda. I'm only asking for the chance to be Ethan's grandmother, and to remind him constantly of where I came from," she added bitterly. "To make sure he knows his mother grew up in a modest house in Springfield, not with country club memberships and European vacations." Patricia, who had been discreetly allowing us our moment, now intervened. "Amanda, is that truly what you believe Maggie wants? To undermine you in Ethan's eyes?" Amanda's mouth tightened. "It doesn't matter what she wants. It's what will happen. Every story about my childhood, every reference to our modest means, as she puts it, is a reminder that I wasn't born into this world, that I'm an outsider who married in." "Oh, Amanda," I said softly, "is that how you see yourself? As an imposter?" She flinched at the word. "I've worked very hard to build a life for Ethan that offers every advantage, every door open to him from birth. No struggles, no limitations. But at what cost?" I asked gently. "The truth? His relationship with his grandmother? Your own past?" "A small price to pay for security," she replied, but her voice lacked conviction. "You know," Patricia said thoughtfully, "my husband's family has been wealthy for 4 generations. Old Chicago money, very established. Do you know what attracted him to me?" Amanda looked surprised at the change of subject. "Your elegance? Your social connections?" Patricia laughed. "Hardly. I was a scholarship student at Northwestern, whose parents couldn't afford to buy me a car. What Richard loved was that I didn't come from his world, that I brought different perspectives, different values. He said marrying someone just like himself would have been terribly boring." Amanda blinked, clearly never having heard this version of the Spencer family history. "My point," Patricia continued, "is that what you see as a liability, your background, your upbringing, others might see as an asset. Authenticity and diversity of experience are values too, Amanda, not just pedigrees and connections." "That's easy for you to say now," Amanda muttered. "You've been established in that world for decades. And I still remember what it felt like to be the outsider," Patricia countered. "The difference is, I never pretended to be something I wasn't. I never denied my parents or where I came from." Amanda flushed, the barb finding its mark. "What Patricia means," I intervened, seeing Amanda's distress, "is that you don't need to erase your past to secure Ethan's future. Both can coexist. He can have the advantages of his father's world and the values of yours." "My values," Amanda repeated with a bitter laugh. "Like what? Living paycheck to paycheck? Being the kid with the hand-me-downs?" "Like resilience," I replied quietly. "Like appreciation for what you earn rather than what you're given. Like the knowledge that a person's worth isn't measured by their bank account or social connections." "Pretty platitudes," Amanda dismissed, but her voice wavered slightly. "Tell me something," I asked, leaning forward. "Are you happy, Amanda? Truly happy? Or are you exhausted from maintaining this perfect image, from constantly worrying that someone might discover you weren't born to privilege?" Her eyes flashed. "Don't psychoanalyze me, Mother. I'm not," I assured her. "I'm asking as someone who loves you, who has always loved you, regardless of your address or bank balance or social circle." For a moment, Amanda's carefully maintained facade cracked. Something raw and vulnerable showed in her expression. The girl I had raised, the daughter I had lost. She began, but was interrupted by Ethan's return, triumphantly clutching tickets from the arcade games. "Mom, I won enough for the big dinosaur," he announced, oblivious to the tension at the table. Amanda's mask slipped back into place, her society smile returning. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Grandma Maggie, will you come see me get my prize?" Ethan asked, turning those hopeful eyes to me. "Of course," I said, rising from the table, relieved for the interruption, yet frustrated by the unfinished conversation with Amanda. As Ethan led me to the prize counter, chattering about ticket values and prize options, I glanced back at the table. Amanda and Patricia were engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation. Amanda's head bowed slightly, Patricia's hand covering hers on the table. I wondered what words were passing between them, what truths might be emerging in my absence. But my attention was quickly reclaimed by Ethan, his excitement over a purple plush Tyrannosaurus Rex requiring my full appreciation. "He's magnificent," I assured him as he clutched his new treasure. "I'm going to name him Richard," Ethan declared. "After Grandpa." My heart swelled. "That's a wonderful name," I managed to say past the lump in my throat. "Mom never talks about him," Ethan confided, his voice dropping. "But now I can ask you, right? You can tell me about him?" "Yes," I promised. "I can tell you all about your grandfather, anytime you want." His small hand slipped into mine as we walked back toward the table. "I'm glad you're not dead," he said, with the brutal simplicity of childhood. "I'm glad I have 2 grandmas now." "So am I," I replied, squeezing his hand gently. "So very glad." When we returned to the table, Amanda was wiping her eyes discreetly with a napkin, while Patricia sat beside her, a supportive hand on her shoulder. Whatever had passed between them had clearly been emotional. "Look, Mom." Ethan held up his dinosaur. "I named him Richard after Grandpa." Amanda's composure slipped again, her eyes meeting mine over Ethan's head. For the first time in years, I saw no anger there, no defensiveness, only a profound sadness, and something that might have been regret. That's perfect," she said, her voice thick. "Dad would have loved that." As the party began to break up, families gathering their belongings and tired children, Amanda approached me while Ethan was saying goodbye to his teammates. "Next Saturday," she said without preamble, "we're having a barbecue at our house. Patricia will be there. Daniel's grilling. It's nothing formal, just..." She hesitated. "Ethan would like you to come." I studied her face, searching for the real message behind this unexpected invitation. "Just Ethan?" Amanda sighed, some of the rigid formality leaving her posture. "It would mean a lot to him, and..." She paused again, seeming to struggle with her next words. "And I think we have more to talk about. In a private setting." It wasn't an apology, nor a declaration of reconciliation, but it was an opening, a crack in the wall she had built between us. "I'd like that," I said simply. She nodded once, replaced her sunglasses, and turned to collect Ethan. As they walked to her car, his small hand in hers, the purple dinosaur clutched in his other arm, I felt something shift inside me, a loosening of the knot of grief and anger I had carried for 5 years. Patricia came to stand beside me in the parking lot. "Well," she said with satisfaction, "I'd say that went significantly better than expected." "What did you say to her?" I couldn't help asking. "When Ethan and I were at the prize counter?" Patricia smiled enigmatically. "I simply reminded her of something she seems to have forgotten, which is that pretending to be someone you're not isn't strength. It's fear." She patted my arm. And Amanda, for all her flaws, was not raised to live in fear. She was raised to be authentic, resilient, and loving by you. As I drove home from Sal's Pizza, the invitation to next Saturday's barbecue felt like more than just a social engagement. It was an acknowledgement, however reluctant, that I belonged in Ethan's life, and by extension, in Amanda's as well. Not as the embarrassing reminder of a past she wanted to forget, but as the grandmother who named stuffed dinosaurs after his grandfather, who cheered at soccer games, who carried hot chocolate in a thermos because she remembered he liked it. The confrontation I had feared for so long had happened, not in a dramatic showdown, but in small moments of truth across a pizza parlor table, not with accusations and evidence, but with memories of softball games and a purple dinosaur named Richard. There was still a long road ahead, trust to rebuild, boundaries to establish, years of absence to bridge. But for the first time since Amanda had declared me dead, I felt truly alive again, not just existing, but living, participating in the life of my grandson and perhaps someday, reconciling with my daughter. The dead, it seemed, could rise again. Not through miracles or magic, but through truth, patience, and the unbreakable bonds of family that persist even when we try to deny them. 3 months after the soccer game pizza party, I stood in my kitchen, carefully frosting a chocolate birthday cake. Not just any cake, a dinosaur-shaped cake for Ethan's 8th birthday party the following day. Amanda had asked me to bake it, remembering how much she had loved my homemade birthday cakes as a child. Asked me, not commanded, not reluctantly permitted, but asked, with a hint of the warmth that had once characterized our relationship. "Do you think you could make one of your special cakes for Ethan's party? He keeps talking about how his mom described your magical birthday cakes." The request had come during our now regular Sunday afternoon visits, when Ethan spent 2 hours at my house, sometimes with Amanda, sometimes dropped off by Daniel, occasionally with Patricia joining us. The supervision requirement had been dropped after the first month, a silent acknowledgement that I posed no threat to Ethan's well-being or to Amanda's relationship with her son. Progress had been slow but steady since that first barbecue at the Spencers' home. Amanda and I had begun the delicate work of rebuilding, not the relationship we had once had, that was gone forever, but something new, something honest. It hadn't been easy. There had been setbacks, moments when old resentments flared, when Amanda's insecurities resurfaced. A particularly difficult episode occurred when Ethan's class did a family heritage project, and he proudly included photos of me and Richard alongside the Spencer family portraits. Amanda had called me afterward, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "He put your photo right next to my father-in-law's, the prestigious judge next to the children's librarian. The Spencer family mansion alongside our little house in Springfield. Is that so terrible?" I had asked gently, "that he sees both sides of his heritage as equally valuable?" Her silence had been answer enough, but there had been breakthroughs too. The day Amanda showed up at my door unannounced, a box of old photo albums in her arms. "These should be here," she'd said simply. "Ethan wants to look through them with you." The afternoon we spent together in my garden, Amanda surprisingly knowledgeable about the perennials I was planting, remembering how she had helped me in this same soil as a child. "You taught me the names of all the flowers," she'd said, handling a delphinium with unexpected tenderness. I still remember them. Most significant was the evening, about 6 weeks after our reconciliation began, when she arrived alone for what would become a watershed conversation. "I've been seeing someone," she admitted, sitting stiffly on my sofa, declining tea or coffee. "A therapist. I think that's wonderful," I had replied, genuinely pleased. "Daniel's idea," she continued. "After everything with Ethan, with you, he thought it might help me understand why I did what I did." "And has it?" I asked carefully. Amanda had looked away, her profile so like her father's in that moment that my heart ached. "She says I have something called imposter syndrome, that I never felt I belonged in Daniel's world, so I tried to erase anything that might expose me as an outsider, including you." "Oh, Amanda," I'd said softly. "She also says," Amanda continued, her voice wavering slightly, "that I've been punishing you." "For what?" "For not being enough to save Dad." Her eyes had finally met mine, swimming with unshed tears. "For not being enough to give me the kind of life where I never felt less than. For being human and imperfect when I needed you to be superhuman." The unfairness of this burden she had placed on me, on herself, had taken my breath away. "No one could have saved your father, Amanda. His heart condition was congenital, and no parent can guarantee their child a life without insecurity or struggle. I know that now," she'd acknowledged. "Logically, at least, the feelings are harder to change." It was the most honest conversation we'd had in over a decade. Not a full reconciliation, not a complete healing of the wound between us, but a diagnosis at last, a naming of the disease that had corrupted our relationship, so that treatment could begin. Now, as I carefully shaped the dinosaur's scales in chocolate frosting, I reflected on how far we had come in these 3 months. The grave visits had stopped. The lie had been replaced with a more complicated but ultimately healthier truth. Grandma and Mom had been estranged for a time, but were working on their relationship now. Ethan had accepted this with the remarkable adaptability of children, seemingly more concerned with making up for lost time than dwelling on past deceptions. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. Wiping my hands on a dish towel, I went to answer it, expecting the delivery of the special dinosaur-themed party hats I had ordered. Instead, Amanda stood on my porch, alone, her expression unreadable. "Amanda," I said, surprised. "Is everything all right? Ethan's fine," she assured me quickly. "He's with Daniel at the Science Museum. She hesitated. "I thought I should come by, to talk, about tomorrow." Of course, I stepped back, inviting her in. "I'm just finishing the cake. Would you like to see it?" She followed me to the kitchen, where the dinosaur cake sat in all its chocolate glory. A smile touched her lips, a real one, reaching her eyes. "It's perfect," she said. "Just like the ones you used to make for me. The Princess Castle for your 6th birthday," I recalled. "The rocket ship for your 10th. The stack of books when I graduated high school," she added softly. I nodded. Pleased she remembered. "Ethan will love this one, I think." Amanda ran a finger along the edge of the counter, not meeting my eyes. "That's actually why I came by. Tomorrow's party? There's something you should know." My heart sank. Was she scaling back my involvement? Had something happened to change the fragile progress we'd been making? "The guest list," she continued. "It includes some of Daniel's colleagues, their children, Patricia's friends from the country club, their grandchildren." "I understand," I said carefully. "If you'd prefer I just drop off the cake—" "No," she interrupted, surprising me with her vehemence. "That's not what I'm saying at all." She took a deep breath. "What I'm trying to tell you is that these people, they're the ones I've been so concerned about impressing. The ones I thought would judge me, judge us, for our background." I waited, uncertain where this was going. "And I want you there," she said finally, meeting my eyes. "Not just in the background, not just as the grandmother who's tolerated but kept separate, as my mother, as an important part of our family." The simple declaration struck me speechless. For years, Amanda had gone to extraordinary lengths to hide me from these very people, to the point of declaring me dead, rather than explain my modest background. Now, she was not only including me, but acknowledging our relationship openly. "What changed?" I asked when I found my voice. Amanda's smile was sad but genuine. "I did. Or at least, I'm trying to." She gestured vaguely. "Therapy helps. So does watching Ethan with you. How naturally he's bonded with you. How he values your stories, your perspective." She moved to the window, looking out at my garden where she had played as a child. "I realized something recently. All those years I spent trying to fit in with Daniel's world, trying to be what I thought they wanted me to be. I was miserable, constantly afraid of being found out as an imposter, exhausted from maintaining the facade. And now?" I asked gently. "Now I'm trying something different," she said simply. "Authenticity. Patricia's word, not mine." She smiled ruefully. "Turns out my formidable mother-in-law has been my biggest champion in this." "Patricia is a wise woman," I acknowledged. "Wiser than I gave her credit for," Amanda agreed. "She told me something that really hit home. She said, 'The truly secure don't need to pretend. Only those afraid of their own worth create fictions about themselves.'" I nodded, recognizing Patricia's straightforward wisdom. "So, tomorrow," Amanda continued, "I want you there as yourself. My mother who worked 2 jobs after Dad died to keep our home, who read to me every night no matter how tired she was, who taught me that intelligence and kindness matter more than designer labels or social connections." Tears filled my eyes at this description, so different from the narrative Amanda had constructed in recent years, where I was an embarrassment to be hidden away, a reminder of origins better forgotten. "Are you sure?" I asked. "This is a big step." "I'm terrified, actually," she admitted with a small laugh. "But yes, I'm sure. It's time, Mom. Time to stop hiding. Time to be whole again." "Mom." She had called me Mom, not Mother or Margaret as she had done since her marriage to Daniel. The simple word carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken reconciliations. "There's something else," she said, reaching into her purse. "Something I want to give back to you." She withdrew a small velvet box I recognized immediately. My breath caught as she placed it in my hand. "Dad's wedding ring," I whispered, opening the box to reveal the simple gold band Richard had worn for 15 years until the day he died. "I took it after the funeral," Amanda confessed. "I was so angry, at you, at the world, at God, for taking him from us. I think even then I was looking for someone to blame. The ring was my connection to him, something you couldn't control." I stroked the ring gently. I had searched for it after Richard's death, assuming the funeral home had misplaced it. eventually giving up hope of finding this last tangible connection to our marriage. "Why return it now?" I asked. "Because it was never mine to take," she said simply. "Because holding on to it was part of my anger, my refusal to accept that he was gone, that our life had changed, my need to punish you for not being able to prevent his death." "Oh, Amanda," I murmured, closing my hand around the precious object. "I was 15, she continued, old enough to know better, young enough to be consumed by grief and rage, and then that anger became a habit, a lens through which I viewed everything. Even after I met Daniel, even after Ethan was born, some part of me was still that angry teenager, looking for someone to blame for the fact that life didn't turn out the way I thought it should. Her self-awareness struck me as a profound change from the defensive, image-obsessed woman who had declared me dead to protect her social standing. This Amanda was looking inward with unflinching honesty, examining her own motivations rather than projecting fault onto others. "We all make mistakes," I said gently, slipping the ring onto my thumb, the only finger large enough to hold it. "The important thing is recognizing them, trying to make amends." "Like declaring your mother dead?" she asked with a bitterness directed at herself. "That's a bit beyond a mistake, Mom." "Yes," I acknowledged. "It was cruel and deeply harmful. To me, to Ethan, ultimately to you as well." She nodded, accepting the assessment without defensiveness. "I can't undo it. I can't give you back those 5 years with Ethan, but I can make sure you don't lose any more time with him. With us. Us." Another small but significant choice of word. "Thank you," I said simply. "For the ring. For tomorrow. For trying." Amanda's eyes welled with tears. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "Forgiveness isn't about deserving," I told her, echoing words my own mother had once shared with me. "It's about choosing to move forward unburdened by the past." I made that choice the moment Ethan found me at the mall. Everything since has just been figuring out what that looks like in practice. She wiped her eyes, glancing at the dinosaur cake on the counter. "It looks like chocolate frosting and birthday candles," she said with a watery smile. "It looks like family dinners and soccer games and photo albums. It looks like the truth, messy as it might be." "The truth," I agreed. "A good place to start again." As Amanda prepared to leave, she paused at the door. "One more thing. I've been thinking, the guest room in our house. It's rarely used except when Patricia visits from Chicago. Would you would you like to help me redecorate it? Make it comfortable for when you might want to stay over? For holidays or weekends? Or just because? The invitation, to have a place in her home, a physical space that acknowledged my permanent role in their lives, brought fresh tears to my eyes. "I'd like that very much," I managed to say. "Good," she nodded decisively. "We'll start next week. Ethan already has ideas. Apparently it needs a bookshelf because, and I quote, 'Grandma Maggie was a librarian, Mom. She needs lots of books.'" I laughed through my tears. "Smart boy. He gets that from you," Amanda said softly. Then, with a quick, almost shy movement, she stepped forward and hugged me, the first real embrace we had shared in years. It was brief, a bit awkward, but undeniably real, a physical manifestation of the bridges being rebuilt between us. After she left, I returned to the kitchen to put the finishing touches on Ethan's dinosaur cake. As I worked, I found myself humming, an old habit I had lost during the dark years of separation. The simple, unconscious expression of contentment felt like coming home to myself. The next day, Ethan's birthday party unfolded exactly as Amanda had promised. I was welcomed not as an awkward addition, but as an integral part of the family. Amanda introduced me to Daniel's colleagues and Patricia's friends with simple honesty. "This is my mother, Maggie Winters, Ethan's grandmother." No explanations about our estrangement, no awkward justifications for my previous absence from Ethan's life, just the plain truth of our relationship, acknowledged without shame or embarrassment. When the dinosaur cake was revealed to delighted gasps from the children and appreciative murmurs from the adults, Amanda stood beside me, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. "My mother made this," she told the gathered guests. "She made cakes like this for me every birthday when I was growing up. It's a family tradition we're reviving. Family tradition." The phrase resonated through me like the gentle vibration of a bell. Not just words, but a declaration of continuity, of connection across generations. Later, as Ethan blew out his candles, I caught Patricia's eye across the room. She raised her glass in a subtle toast, her expression one of quiet satisfaction. We had formed an unlikely alliance, this wealthy Chicago matriarch and I, united in our love for Ethan and our concern for Amanda's well-being. Daniel approached as I was helping cut cake for eager children. "Thank you," he said simply, "for the cake, for your patience with Amanda, for not giving up on us as a family even when we gave you every reason to. Family is worth fighting for," I replied, "even when it's complicated, especially then." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Amanda is different these days. Lighter somehow. More herself, whatever that means. It means she's finding her way back to authenticity, I suggested. Learning that she doesn't have to choose between her past and her present, that both can coexist. "Well, whatever you want to call it," he smiled. "It looks good on her." It did. Throughout the party, I watched my daughter interact with guests, no longer performing the role of perfect society wife, but simply being Amanda, occasionally referencing her public school education or her father's career as a music teacher, without the self-consciousness that had once characterized any mention of her background. As the party wound down, Ethan found me in a quiet corner of the backyard, clutching his new favorite possession, a paleontology kit from Patricia, along with Richard the dinosaur from our pizza parlor outing. "This was the best birthday ever," he declared, leaning against my side with the easy physical affection of childhood. "I'm glad, sweetheart," I said, putting my arm around his shoulders. "Mom says you're going to help fix up the guest room so you can stay over sometimes," he continued. "Can we have a sleepover? With popcorn and movies like you used to do with Mom when she was little? I'd like that very much," I told him, "if your parents approve." "They will," he said with absolute confidence. "Dad says you're good for Mom, that you help her remember who she really is." Out of the mouths of children. Such profound observations delivered with such casual certainty. "And who is she really?" I couldn't help asking. Ethan considered this question with adorable seriousness. "She's my mom, and your daughter, and Dad's wife, and a marketing expert. That's her job. And someone who used to play softball and likes chocolate cake, and gets scared sometimes that she's not good enough. But that's silly because she's great." His assessment, delivered with the simple clarity of a child who sees past pretense to essential truth, brought tears to my eyes. "Yes," I agreed softly. "That's exactly who she is." Later that evening, as the last guests departed, Amanda found me gathering my things to leave. Ethan was upstairs with Daniel, arranging his birthday presents in what I imagined was a very specific 7-year-old organizational system. "Mom," Amanda said, suddenly seeming uncertain, Would you like to stay for dinner? Nothing fancy, just leftovers from the party," but she trailed off, then gathered herself. "I'd like you to stay, if you want to." The invitation hung between us. Not a grand gesture, not a dramatic declaration of complete reconciliation, but a simple step toward normalcy, toward family. "I'd love to," I said. As we moved around the kitchen together, storing leftover cake, preparing a casual dinner from party platters, I felt the gentle settling of something long out of alignment finally finding its proper place. Not perfect, not without the scars of our painful history, but functional again, whole in a new way. "I've been thinking," Amanda said, as she arranged sliced vegetables on a plate, "about changing Ethan's middle name. It's currently Spencer, after Daniel's family. I'd like to add Winters. Ethan Richard Spencer Winters." She glanced up, gauging my reaction. "What do you think?" The suggestion, acknowledging our family line, our history, our name as having value equal to the prestigious Spencer legacy, spoke volumes about Amanda's evolving perspective. "I think his grandfather would be honored," I said, emotion thick in my voice. "As am I." She nodded, satisfied. "We'll talk to him about it tomorrow. I want it to be his choice too." Of course. As we worked side by side, I thought about the long, strange journey that had brought us to this moment. From the shocking question in a mall food court, "Grandma, why did Mom say you died?" to this quiet evening in Amanda's kitchen, planning a future that included rather than excluded me. The dead grandmother had come back to life, not through any miracle, but through truth's slow, persistent emergence. The lie that had seemed easier than honesty had ultimately created more pain than it prevented. The wall built to keep the past at bay had only imprisoned its builder. Now that wall was coming down, brick by painful brick. In its place, a bridge was forming, not a return to what was, but a path to something new, something honest, something real. When Ethan and Daniel came downstairs for dinner, we gathered around the table, not as perfect people with a perfect history, but as a family with flaws and failures, and the courage to face them, to forgive them, to move beyond them. "Grandma Maggie," Ethan asked as we began to eat, "will you tell me a story about when Mom was my age? A true one?" I looked at Amanda, silently asking permission. She nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Well," I began, reaching for both their hands across the table. "When your mother was about your age, she decided she wanted to open a library for the neighborhood children in our backyard shed." As I spoke, weaving the simple tale of Amanda's childhood determination and creativity, I watched my daughter's face, no longer tense with fear of exposure, but softened with recognition, with remembrance of the girl she had been before shame and insecurity led her down the path of deception. That girl wasn't gone, I realized with profound relief. She had been buried, perhaps, under layers of pretense and performance, but not destroyed, not dead, any more than I had been. And like me, she was finding her way back to life, to authenticity, to wholeness. In telling Ethan his mother's story, I was helping Amanda reclaim it for herself. In acknowledging the past, we were creating space for a different future, one where truth, however imperfect or inconvenient, formed the foundation of our family narrative. Richard's wedding ring gleamed on my thumb as I gestured, telling the story, a tangible reminder of what had been lost and what had, against all odds, been found again. Not a perfect ending. Life rarely offers those, but a new beginning, a resurrection of sorts. For both the grandmother once declared dead and the relationship that had seemed beyond saving. Proof that even the most painful lies can give way to truth, that estrangement can evolve into reconciliation, that what seems irrevocably broken can be mended with enough time, enough courage, enough love. And in the end, isn't that the story we all hope to tell? Not one of perfect lives lived without mistake or regret, but of human beings finding their way back to each other despite wrong turns and painful detours, of family bonds that bend but don't break, of love that persists even when tested by human frailty. As I finished the story, Ethan's eyes bright with interest, Amanda's soft with memory, Daniel's warm with appreciation, I felt a sense of completion. The circle that had been broken was reforming, not into its original shape, but into something new, something tested by fire and stronger for it. "I remember that library," Amanda said quietly when I finished. "Dad built shelves for my books. We made library cards out of index cards." "You were the librarian," I confirmed, very strict about return dates. She laughed, a genuine sound, free from the brittle edge that had characterized her for so long. Some things never change, but some things do change, I thought, looking around the table at my family, estranged and then reunited, broken and then mending. Some things change profoundly when we find the courage to face our fears, to speak our truths, to forgive our trespasses. The grandmother declared dead was alive again, not just in body, but in role, in relationship, in family narrative. The daughter, lost to shame and pretense, was finding her way back to authenticity. The grandson, denied his heritage, was reclaiming it, piece by piece, story by story. This was resurrection in its most human form. Not divine intervention, but the natural healing that occurs when truth replaces lies, when love overcomes fear, when family finds its way back to what matters most. Not perfect, not finished, but alive, and real, and true. And in the end, that's all any of us can ask for. Not a life without mistakes, but the chance to learn from them. Not relationships without conflict, but the will to work through it. Not a family without flaws, but the love to accept each other anyway. As evening settled around Amanda's home, our family's home now in a real sense, I realized that the lie that had once defined us had lost its power. In its place stood a better story, one of reconciliation, of second chances, of a grandmother and her grandson building the relationship they'd been denied, of a mother finding the courage to embrace her whole self rather than hide the parts that didn't fit her idealized image. A true story, our story, still being written, one honest word at a time.